And that book, man, we went total in the hole. I think it was close to about 30 G's on a total
Ooh.
loss on that, because the little bit that issue one netted on profits from selling well was all taken away as we went into the negative at the end of the print run.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Panels on Pages. My name is Dalibor Zujovic, and I am joined today by Jon McCarthy of Endangered comic of the upcoming, is it the Dirt Witch?
Dirt Witch, yes,
The
that's our next
Dirt
one.
Witch. Tell me about this new project. The Endangered is alien invasion kind of joint.
No, Endangered was it was originally started off, it was going to be an 8-issue series that we
Okay.
published. We did the first 4 last year. The story behind that one is it's slightly in the future.
Mm.
The human race has pretty much been wiped out by a nuclear war. The last surviving members were this team of scientists who were on this low orbiting space station above the planet. And they kind of come up with this chemical solution which would lower the radiation levels enough to allow them to return to Earth safely. So they spend decades really showering this down onto the planet. And the story kind of opens when we're at the point where it's safe for them to return. What they don't realize was that some of the insects that survived that nuclear attack have been eating this stuff for the decades, and it's kind of facilitated their evolution so that when they return to Earth, they find that spiders are the size of minivan,
Jeez.
wasps are the size of basically large birds of prey, things like that. So yeah, it's basically people fighting these big ass bugs on a desolate Earth, kind of a Thundar the Barbarian type landscape.
Gotcha. And you said the 4 issues came out. Are the other 4 like on deck? They're due to come
Yeah,
out,
we
or
kind of we had to put the thing on hiatus. Unfortunately, I had to put it on shelf for a little bit. And the reason behind that was our first issue came out and did outstanding sales numbers. It was published through a company called Blood Moon Comics.
okay?
And we a little bit over ambitiously thought that we would be able to crank this out as a monthly book.
Mm.
And so we tried. We were banging them out pretty good, but there was a major kind of screw up that occurred. This was our Endangered was the first project, the first real project that Blood Moon tried to come out with as a publishing company. They had done some stuff before just to get into Diamond and things like that, but this was their first, like, let's go out and become a real publishing company. So we were kind of the first title they launched with that. But unfortunately, issue 1 came out, did great. There was a big mistake that was allowed to be made through Diamond. So I'm not really sure exactly who totally is at fault here, but at this point, it doesn't really matter. But what had happened was they allowed the FOC date for the issue 2 to be set prior to comic book stores receiving their issue 1s. So shops got issue 1. It was pretty well regarded. A lot of people liked the book. It sold well for comic shops. I think we did I want to say it was like 6,000 copies sold for issue 1, which was great from a relatively no name
Yeah,
creative.
for Andy for sure.
Yeah, and a small publisher like that. But because of that FOC thing, when people got issue 1 from their store, had a chance to read it, and they were like, "Oh, this is cool. I want to get my issue 2." It was unavailable. So we are typically with indie comics, you see that you have, it's pretty common to have maybe like a 30 to 40% drop down on your second issue, around the same for the third, and then you'll slowly start to see a climb back up. But what we saw was an over 80% drop
Ooh.
on issue 2. And that really threw the train off the tracks. And then, like I said, we were trying to crank these out monthly. And unfortunately, just the timing really screwed us. And we were never quite able to catch traction again. And then at that point, Blood Moon was using a printer that was kind of the unit price, the individual book price was dependent on the print run, on how many copies you were
Sure.
printing. The more you were printing, the lower the book would be. Well, once we dropped down to I think issue 2 is like maybe 1,200 copies were able to be printed because of that initial snafu. And then issue 3 dropped to 1,000. And then 4, I think, fell below 1,000, which are still not terrible numbers. But in that current situation at that time, it was costing more to fulfill those small orders than we could have possibly made on the books. It was priced at, I think it was a $3.99 cover price at that time, because we wanted to go out and kind of compete, to be able to compete on the shelves of comic shops. And so anyways, yeah, that was the story behind Endangered. The goal is always going to be to resume that series, and we're hopeful that maybe this year I've figured a lot of stuff out, learned a lot since then, And I'm hoping that by being able to incorporate a Kickstarter in the future, maybe we can relaunch those titles, because we had variant covers drawn and we're ready to keep going with it that were never even used. One of which was drawn by
Oh wow.
Joe Rubenstein did one for us.
Jeez.
Yeah, so we got some really cool stuff that's just kind of in the vault, for a lack of a better term, waiting for us to go and relaunch it. So the goal is hopefully that we can continue to find our reader base with the one shots that we're releasing this year, and hopefully the stars will align for us a little bit and we'll be able to resume that series and relaunch it, basically, is the concept, probably on a platform like Kickstarter, because we lost a lot. The economic side of it is, we go to the publisher with the books finished, so we pay for the books up front,
Right.
all the costs and everything like that. And that book, man, we went total in the hole. I think it was close to about 30 G's on a total loss on that, because the little bit that issue one netted on profits from selling well was all taken away as we went into the negative at the end of the print run. So we never saw a penny back from that,
Oh geez.
which was a big hit. And it was also the main reason we had to kind of shelf it. We were like, dude, there's no sense in putting out an issue 5 right now, because we're just circling the drain here. It wasn't because no one liked the story. And that was the most frustrating part, I think, was, as a creator, it's easier to accept if you put a book out and it's kind of panned. If people are like, nah, I don't really like it, I think it's the
Right.
art, the story was stupid, whatever. That
Yeah,
I
it
could
was that's a swing and a miss. Like,
yeah,
hey, I tried.
that's digestible to me as a creator. I can be like, all right, it didn't work out. It's way more harder to swallow that pill, though, whenever logistical things that shouldn't have happened happen.
Right.
And like I said, Blood Moon's grown a lot since then. We've definitely grown a lot since as creators and learned the business a lot better. And so, yeah, that's the long-term goal, because everyone is now, who've read the first 4 issues, really liked it, which is, super cool. And also incredibly frustrating, because you're like, man, I have people coming to me like, hey, when's issue 5 coming out? And they don't fully, I don't think, understand that there's a big business side to this, and we're creating on a pretty small level. I mean, I'm not, independently wealthy. And fortunately, actually, I have a business partner who likes my stories enough that he's a friend of mine who decides to make these things up front,
Oh
So
wow, that's really cool.
it's really nice. So, long story short, the goal is always going to be to finish up that series, because everyone involved with it, we know where it's going to end. And it's because the first 4 issues were received as well as they were. I think the last 4, the fans who've read it, deserve to have that ending. And so do the creative team that made the book also deserve to finish, to have the opportunity to finish it up and stuff. So,
For sure.
hopefully this year will be the Endangered year. So we'll just have to see how it all shakes out, man.
I hope so. I mean, I just ordered the trade. I was hoping it would get here by the recording here, but it didn't make it. But yeah, so I hope so as well. Especially, like, I like that you came into it, because a lot of people, and this is kind of like one of the general, like the typical questions I ask is, do you sit down with like a planned ending, or do you just sit down, I'm going to write this until I can run out of ideas? And I like that you were like, hey, I'm going to do this as an 8-issue series. And I dig that, because it's atypical, honestly, in the indie space.
Well, I mean, I did, honest to full disclosure, I suffered from that as well. Like most creators do, as I went into it, I was like, man, this is going to be an ongoing series. Robert Kirkman did it. I can do it, and then we went to launch, and it was like, all right, that's way too ambitious. And that was some good insight that Blood Moon gave me. They were like, we're not really super comfortable doing you a contract in perpetuity, saying that this will just last forever. And they kind of gave me, we had some conversations back and forth, and I was like, yeah, I think I can do a solid start to finish story in 8 issues that, if it's received, I mean, we built a big universe with this, a big world. I mean, no pun intended, it's Earth, but our version of Earth, where if we get to 8 and it's done well and people like it, you can always kind of kick it back off with another character or the same characters, and it could continue to go. But I was able to kind of outline start to finish ending in that 8-issue series, where I can, like, okay, we can do this. And if there's never anything else done from this will be a satisfying conclusion to the story, So that was one of the first lessons I learned going into it. It was like, and I agree with you. I think a lot of new creators come out thinking like, oh, I've got this great idea, man. This is going to be an ongoing series. This is going to last forever. And it's not practical. And listen, Endangered was greenlit and started when there was still a bit of a comic boom going on,
Right.
Today it's way more difficult to launch a series, because it's what you're doing, and this is another thing I talk, granted, I'm not, Stan Lee here. I'm relatively still inexperienced myself. I've got, I think, 7-8 books out now. But when I talk to someone who, if I'm at a convention and someone comes up to me and they're like, hey man, I haven't done a comic, but I've got this idea and I want to do it. I tell them, like, look, you have to, it's very important that you understand the business side of this creation process. And I think that's a big area where a lot of creators, especially newer ones, kind of fall off, is you have to understand the mindset and where the comic shops are coming from. Because when you're doing a series that you're shooting it out in Diamond, first of all, you're dealing with a catalog that thick. That's what, I don't know how many thousands of titles are in each month of those that come out.
Right.
But you are asking a comic book shop owner to say, all right, I want you to take some of your budget away to buy my stuff. When that's a gamble for them. It's much easier for them to buy the next issue of Spider-Boy or whatever that's hot at the moment. But they're if you can convince them to allocate even, $15 of that budget to buy 3 or 4 copies of your book, that's a big thing to ask, because especially these days, because they're operating on such tighter margins now and such tighter budgets, because everything's not selling like it was a couple of years ago. It was way easier to launch a series when we launched Endangered. And maybe serendipitous that it kind of ended the when it did, because who knows if we would have sustained this economic downturn that comics is seeing right now, and really all the economy is seeing.
Everything, yeah.
And that's honestly why this year we've just done one shots. That was kind of a strategy when I made the decision to kind of shelve Endangered. I was like, all right, man, I have a lot of other stories that I want to tell. It's definitely not an ongoing is not the move, so it was either do a mini series or do like a way smaller than 8-issue mini series, or just try some one shots. And I love horror stories. So I decided, what, I'm going to do some horror one shots and just tell some of these stories that I have that could, if they were ever to blow up, that, that's always the thing with one shots. I think, like, I guess it kind of depends on how you can structure it, but it's a one and done story. But if it's liked enough, then you can always tell more stories from that world. Like, for instance, the one we just wrapped Kickstarter on, and thank you for being a part of that. But I think you were, right, Loup Garou? Yeah. So the A cover for that book's actually coming out in the next week or two in shops that ordered it. I think it was only, I think we only got about 700 or 800 orders through Diamond. So that goes to show how difficult it is to move a book to a comic shop right now.
I'll be honest, that's more than I would have expected. Like, especially like it's just in general. I mean, anybody and any indie, because it's like there's 115 Bat books, there's 27 Avengers books, there's 30 X-Men books.
Yeah,
all this stuff is built-in fan bases, built-in sales. Yep. So for someone to just be like, all right, I can't, I got to order maybe a couple less copies of X-Men. Maybe I won't have shelf copies.
Yeah.
So I can pick up this indie, like, never heard of it. Maybe I just like the concept or the title or something just hits. Maybe the cover is just banging and like this will move because it's a hot cover, but it's still like, it's a gamble. So like, I mean, 700 copies, that is, I mean, how many people were on the Kickstarter total?
I think we got to 117 by the time it ended. But I will say this, that the book that Loup Garou was the third one that we put out this year. The first one came out last month or the month before, and this one I thought was a slam dunk. It was called Comic Book Trivia, and the concept was I wanted to do something that hadn't been done in comics in a long time. Back in the 80s and 70s, 80s, and I think even still into the 90s, there were a lot more comics that you could get from a comic shop that weren't just a comic book, the fun and games books and things like that. So I was like, I looked it up and made sure I'd be legally good. And then once I learned that, like, you can't copyright facts, which are what trivia are, I was like, oh man, dude. So I came up with this concept to hit up a buddy of mine named Robbie Musso, who did Transformers and Speed Racer and stuff with IDW. Luckily, he also lives in New Orleans here, and we're friends. And I was like, hey man, let's do something together. Draw this book. I said, I want to do it'll open with like a 3-4 page sequential comic story. It'll be a 22-page book, but then the last 18, 19 pages will just be 150 trivia questions from all publishers and all eras of comics. And it was awesome. It turned out great. And we decided to do, man, we're going to make sure these come in sealed bags. We're going to put trading cards on the inside, and people will have a chance if they pull a golden ticket card, they'll win the original art for that trading card from Robbie and all this stuff.
Oh, wow.
Freaking slam dunk, you would think, right? So, dude, I spent pushing that book. And this is the long form answer to how we were able to sell 700 copies of Loup Garou in comic shops. Was I had curated this list of shops that I had called during the Endangered days, right? Just calling shops in every state, Canada, Australia, wherever
Oh, wow.
yeah, everywhere I can, Puerto Rico, everywhere I could find a comic book store that ordered from Diamond, I would call them. So I'd curated this list of, it was around 600 comic stores. And so I would call them every issue. Hey, man, this is John again, from Endangered. How'd the last one do? Oh, you liked it? Cool, man. Well, the new one's up in Diamond. If you would be cool to pre-order it. And so I've kind of built this little bit of a relationship with some of these shops. There's a lot of them that you talk to. And so when Comic Book Trivia came out, same thing. Hit them hard, hit them hard, hit them hard. Because I was like, dude, this is a slam dunk book, right? I mean, it's not dependent on me. It's not really dependent on the creative team. It's trivia questions. Everyone loves.
It's it's just like a fun book. It's a fun
Yeah,
project. I remember my buddy Juan was talking about it on TikTok.
Yep. One read an advanced copy for us. But so we put it out, and that one did 1,200, which was great. But to me, I was like, 1,200. I thought that for sure would have been like 5,000 easy, because I was like, this will sell itself, but it didn't, so things didn't work out the way we thought it was. And then we released this zombie story called Signal 29. And that one did, man, I don't know. I don't even remember. It was less than Loup Garou was ordered. So when Loup Garou came out, I called a lot of the shops up again, not quite as many as I did for the trivia book. So that's, I think, why, from the relationship I had built by just and dude, I usually put in, when I have a book coming out, and this is another thing I always tell new creators, you have to freaking hustle, man. You have to be hustle. A lot of them think, oh, I'm just going to get my book in Diamond and it's going to be golden. Dude, that doesn't really honestly mean anything, because if you flip through that catalog there, it's weird, because you say we're not competing with any other books. So it's not like our books are in competition with any other books. And as far as story and all that, you're not really, but in some ways you are, because you have to compete for that retailer's dollar to order your book. And that goes to what you were saying earlier, is you are putting your comic book, whatever letter your title starts with, it's just going to go onto the shelf. And if it starts with an A, you're going to be right beside Amazing Spider-Man and every other book that they're putting out. So you have to be able to compete. And you're not even all the time, you're not even going to get a full view of your cover. It's going to be something like this, because it's going to be, here's your book, here's the next book, here's the, because shelf space are limited on this. I mean, everybody's been in the comic book store, you know how it works. So there's a lot that goes into, number one, you have to make a killer book, because that's one way. If you can get the retailer to buy it, if you don't view that as a creator as a mutual trust relationship that you've built with that retailer, you're making a major mistake. Because if you don't deliver them a book that's good, that looks good, number one, it's not going to sell for them. And then not only are you going to hurt yourself from them ever ordering your products, your future titles, you're also going to hurt other indie creators, because maybe they took a chance on my book and my book didn't sell and my book sucked. Next time, that order needs to be placed, they're going to look over at that shelf and see John's book sitting out there that hasn't sold any, and they're like, I'm just going to go the safe bet and order the Batman book, this time, and instead of taking another chance like that. So there are shops around the country who are super indie friendly, which are super cool, but there's not enough of them to sustain a book only through that publishing.
For sure.
So it's really difficult, man. You have to sell. Like I was talking to someone on Instagram the other day about this, and they were like, why did you do your variants on Kickstarter? Why did you choose to do your variant covers on Kickstarter? And I was like, dude, because you can't. Diamond sales alone are just not enough. Like the economics of this is, so let's say, for instance, we have a $5 cover book, right? And I'll just use, not to give out Blood Moon's business, but this is my business as well, so I feel okay to share. So let's just use a scenario. So each retailer, it kind of depends on how big they are versus how much of a discount they get. But typically, they're going to be looking at 45% off of cover is what they're going to pay for it, right?
Sure.
Diamond keeps 15%. So right out the gate, 60% of that $5 is gone. So
Right.
then you're looking at, I think it's $2.40 because I've used this this analogy so many times. So say $2.40 comes back to the publisher. Out of that $2.40 comes your print costs and your shipping costs to Diamond's fulfillment centers. So, dude, you're talking like best case scenario, if you wind up looking at 30, 40 cents per copy that you'll actually see, that's a good outcome for a small publisher, for a small title. So now do the math on how much did it cost you to make that book. We typically spend in around the $7,000 range of art costs to make one of our books because we understand, like I mentioned earlier, we have to be able to compete on those comic shelves, So we put a big emphasis on hiring really talented artists, the whole team, to put out a good looking book.
Sure.
And it's expensive, and it shouldn't be cheap. There's a fine line I'm finding where, and this is my own personal take. I don't judge anyone else for this, but I view when I'm going to bring in an artist, there's a level where where it becomes exploitive, where you're taking advantage of that person,
Yeah.
And if they're super talented, the odds of you finding someone who's super talented and also ignorant of what they should be charging,
Right.
not common. So when you work with pro teams, it's worth that investment to me, but it makes that getting a return on that investment that much more difficult. And again, when someone's putting up the money to make that book,
Right.
and unless you're independently wealthy or sitting on some trust fund where you can afford to just drop, 4 books a year, that's $28,000. You're going to need a mechanism to get that back. So this creator was asking me that on Instagram. I was like, he's like, yeah, I spent $6,000 on getting my book made. I'm like, dude, let's do the math. I said, you would need to sell around 20,000 copies through Diamond, making 30 cents or whatever to make that back.
Right.
That's estimate. If you got a calculator, don't crucify me on the math, but it's something like that. And the reality is you're not going to sell that.
Those are mid-tier Marvel book numbers.
Yes.
Those are mid-tier DC book numbers. Like those, I'm the indie hype man. I love the indie space.
Yeah.
If this is the first time you're hearing this, this is the first time you're seeing this out of my face, you're not going to be hitting 20,000 books. I'm sorry.
You're not.
I'm sorry.
You're not. That's something to aspire to, but I feel like it's a disservice to allow an indie creator, someone especially who hasn't gone through this journey yet. It's an important journey to go through. It's really important, I think, to learn these lessons as you go. But some of these lumps you can take from someone like me, and you have to listen and just understand that you have to go into this with a strategy. I personally, because then usually people are like, well, why do you even waste time with putting your books in Diamond? Well, my view of that is I love the idea of having our books in comic shops. If it's, say there's 700 copies of Loup Garou ordered, say that's, 300 shops or 250 shops ordering 3 copies a piece, whatever the math comes out to be. That means I have such a history of my life with comic book stores where way before I was even writing or creating anything, they're just places that have brought me joy for a lot of time. And I love the idea of having my book in there to hopefully maybe be that joy book for someone else. So I don't do it for the money. I kind of look at Diamond as a write-off and no way of getting it out there. It's nice to get the book out there and to build these relationships with the creators. And I think it's important, especially if you plan on your future to continue to be putting out published works, you need to suffer through these lower sales numbers, and eventually you start building up a reader base, hopefully. And equally as important is these relationships with these comic book stores where you're willing to really kind of do whatever you can do to help them sell their copies. And then slowly, comics is a long game. It's a marathon, and it takes a lot of time before you get to the point where you start seeing sales numbers where you're making the kind of money that you need to not only reimburse yourself for the cost of making the book, but also make a profit, which is ultimately the goal, because there is a major business side to this whole thing. I think a lot of people, it's easy to get caught up and get enamored with the fun part, which is the creative process of it, the
Of
bringing this
course.
to life and all that. That's what everyone loves to do. That's what I love to do. But you have to, it's paramount if you're going to try to be a published creator, to understand all of this stuff and be realistic when you go into it, and have all of the strategies in place that you need to help yourself succeed. Because I can tell you, just putting a book in Lunar or Diamond or whatever it might be, there, that 15% Diamond, it's the same Lunar takes, so
Right.
you want a book in those catalogs. Number one, you need to put out a good book, and number two, you have to understand that that's highly most likely that it will not see any sort of dent in recuperating what it costs you to make the book.
Right.
And I'm with you, man. I love indie comics, and fortunately, there's multiple ways to get the books to people. I would caution most people that I'd always been kind of apprehensive about Kickstarter prior to this. I was like, man, I mistakenly made the assumption when we did Endangered. I made the mistake of thinking you're either a published Diamond creator or a Kickstarter creator.
Mm.
And I didn't quite figure it out really until the Signal 29 book came out, the zombie book that came out a couple months ago. And I was like, well, why can't you do both things? Fortunately, I have the relationship with Blood Moon that affords that, because some publishers, you don't really have any kind of control like that. So that's the nice part about dealing with the small
Right.
publishers. You actually are able to communicate with them. And even on the indie publisher level, the ones that people would probably want to go with, the Scouts, the Booms, the Vaults, and those guys, those are still fairly large companies.
For sure.
I've never worked for those guys, so I can't directly speak to what the experience is like with them, but I can't imagine that I can just text the person that runs the show and
Right.
have them call me in 2 hours, and we can be like, hey, dude, listen, I want to do this with my stuff going forward because I'm not making any money. And if I'm not making any money, I'm not going to be able to make books with you anymore. And they're like, oh, yeah, cool. That sounds good to us. So that was the relationship that I had with Blood Moon, which was super cool. And there are publishers on that level, and I think those actually might wind up being the better avenues for smaller creators to pursue. Like, you really need your reader base, because sometimes the worst thing that could happen to you is if you miraculously happen to get someone at Image who's like, yeah, we'll publish your brand new book from you that no one knows. Your book doesn't sell well, you're not going to be with them long.
No.
And so, what's the better scenario, is to peak early and then just crash and burn, or eat those turd burgers for a few years and build your readers up, and then maybe eventually you level up to that, and that to me is the way that people should shoot for. And a lot of people don't want to do it. A lot of people are impatient, but I mean, dude, I'm an older indie creator, as you can see here. So some of these younger guys, man, you have to be patient, and you have to have a strategy. I think you have to have a vision board, and with realistic goals and realistic steps laid out in front of you to help to make yourself succeed, because it's a tough thing, man. It's a lot of rejection in this world. It's a hard pill to swallow when you put a book out and they're like, yeah, it sold 700 copies. And you're like, dude, come on. I thought we was past that now, but
But I mean, like, it's
punches.
important to keep that in mind. Like you said, after the Diamond cut, after the publisher cut, 240, and that's before print costs, that's before shipping costs, and let's just pretend that those are free, which would be insane.
Right.
Off a single copy, you're making, off a single issue with that 700, $1,600. You can't even pay for the making of that book.
No.
And that's a scenario where we just invented that printing and shipping are free, which is not a thing.
Here's the other downside too, is fortunately Blood Moon's been smart enough to realize that their order numbers have been so much lower that they have secured some printers locally in places like that who will print kind of like on demand, where they're like, hey, we'll do you, whether it's 10 books or whether it's 1,000 books, it's going to be the same price. that's a much easier gamble for them. But the downside of that is that's typically you're going to be kicking up more. So, say for instance, like a comics wellspring, you're going to be in that probably close to $2 an issue range to print the book, and the only other option you have to get that lower is if you go to one of these major publishers. But again, that's where you're going to go back to that original scenario I discussed, that if you don't print 5,000 copies of the book, you're going to really take a hit on your per unit cost, at that point, because it's going to wind up costing you $4 or $5 through those guys. So
Yeah, it's
a lot to it.
There's a ton to it, because even and I've said, if I throw an image logo on my book, I'm much more likely to make a sale for sure. But at the same time, to get to the point of throwing an image logo on my book, you got to have the team in place. You got to have your schedule in place. Basically, the book has to be guaranteed to be done in a specific time frame. Image doesn't put out quarterly books. Image doesn't put out the next issue comes out in a few months, whatever that means. They publish monthly comics.
And I learned that the first sign that I learned that we made a mistake by trying to be monthly on Endangered was I actually went to San Diego Comic-Con, and the first issue of Endangered came out in June of 2022. And so that following month I was in San Diego, and just, not signing or anything like that. Just I get a professional badge, fortunately, but I just go out to have fun. And I went to a signing for Stray Dogs. Stray Dogs was super huge at that time still. And it was kind of a slow turnout, surprisingly. So I had a moment to chat with, I think it was Trish Forster, and I don't remember who was with her, but I kind of told him, I was like, man, yeah, so we're kind of feeling the stress of this monthly book thing. And she was like, oh, how many did y'all have finished? And I'm like, we went into it with one completed issue. She's like, what? She told me that when they did Stray Dogs, they went to them. I want to say they had 4 issues in the can when Image agreed to publish it. And they had I think that was 6 issues or maybe 8 issues total on that series.
Yeah, it wasn't.
They had a hard time. They had a hard time getting those last couple ones finished in time for that schedule. So just like what you spoke to, that's to put out a book monthly with really 5 people on a team is almost impossible to do that, because that is your artist cranking out X amount of pages a day, your colorist, your inker, everyone has to be churning and burning, because
there's no way around looking like that is a professional schedule, and everyone's got to be on a professional speed.
And even that, dude, I think anybody that puts books out at that level, I think that's why with Image, what I've heard with Image is they want you to come to them with a finished series, especially if you're a newer creator. So if you tell them I have an 8 issues Endangered that I want to publish with you guys, if you don't have the 8 issues of Endangered for them to look at, they're not going to take a chance with it, because stuff happens. We had it happen with us. Somebody gets an abscess tooth, or somebody gets COVID or something like that, and then all of a sudden people can't produce when they're sick or hurt or whatever. So, shit happens. So when you look at a Marvel or DC or these bigger companies that crank these books out like they do, there is a look at the credits page on one of those books. It's a lot more than 5 people to get those things out. You have flatters, you have color, your colorist has assistants, and your inkers have assistants, and it's a lot of work to that. Usually there's a couple pencilers working on it. You have your A-star guy who's going to be on the cover, but he's going to have other people doing backgrounds or whatever for him, so he can draw Spider-Man, swinging through the building that someone else drew. It's hard to do that. It's almost impossible to do it on a small level like that. So, if you want a series and you plan on hitting it off with one of these publishers, and that's pretty common now. I think even Blood Moon may have changed their stance now, where they want you to have at least 3 issues in the can before they'll even agree to publish the thing, because it happens, man. It's a bad look on the publisher, and it pisses off Diamond, which in turn retailers get pissed off because they order a book and they think it's coming out on this period of time, and they don't get it on time. And, again, that all hurts all of the other indie creators and publishers and everyone else who's asking that retailer, hey, please give a little bit of your budget towards us little small indie books. Can't get your books out on time, or if you're delivering a subpar product or what, it hurts everyone else down the line, I think, so It's a very complicated, intricate, fast moving world. I mean,
For sure.
before I got published in comics, I had published a book. I'm a paramedic as my day job, so I wound up writing this memoir about my time with EMS in New Orleans here, and it got me a publishing contract with a smaller book publisher. And with those things, they come out and then they're just still available.
Right.
So you can do stuff with bookstores, and you can plot these appearances, and I can call this Barnes and Noble, and they can order some 4 months after the release date, and we can go in there and do a thing or something like that. Comics don't have that. It is a freaking tight window of a month. Because again, you see those previews catalogs, there's another one coming the next month. There's another one coming the month after that. So when that book comes out, pretty much your pre-order sales are what you're going to get. There's not really a market to get more afterwards. Sometimes, for instance, with the comic book trivia book, Diamond will order up extra, in case they have damages or something like that they have to return. So they maybe order maybe 5-10% beyond the print run. They just store them. And so they can possibly reorder and send some out if the books do really well like that. But that's your window, man. After that, unless the publisher decides to greenlight a second printing and put it in there again, you've done all you're going to do for that book, and then it's over and done with. Trades and things like that become a little bit easier, because that opens you up to a little bit of a different market, because then you can start, bookstores and things like that. A lot of bookshops don't mess with single issue comics, but they will order a graphic novel or a trade paperback collected edition and things like that. So again, it's a lot to it. A lot of the stuff that I've learned, I feel like it's important lessons that a lot of newer creators don't really know. And unfortunately, comics are still kind of the Wild West when it comes to creating them. I mean, it's like making a music. You can kind of go about it a million different ways, but there's no like set standard format on. You start off at point A, and then when you check off all your boxes, by the time you get to point G, you've accomplished your goal. It doesn't work like that. So it's a lot of figure it out as you go type stuff.
For sure.
And there's a million different ways to do it. I'm sure the stuff that I'm talking about, there are other creators out there who've had completely different experiences and be like, oh, I got to know what he's talking about. So you just take it for what you will, but you have to learn all this stuff. And unfortunately,
it's all very interesting as far as like the different approaches. Like I'm friends with a bunch of different creators who are doing things that in different approaches and different tactics. And it's interesting to excuse me, been dealing with a stupid tickle for a couple months now.
The weather, man, does it.
But I like Danny J. Quick. I always go back to him because the man is just out here hustling.
Awesome dude.
He's always he's putting out new prints, right? He's like, hey, we sold out, so I ordered a bunch more prints. His goal, as far as I can tell, I haven't directly discussed this with him, but from what I'm seeing, is his goal is to just essentially always have all his books available. His approach is different than, hey, like yourself, we put this many were printed and that's it. Right. Unless it comes out another time, unless the publisher decides, oh, hey, like let's say when you relaunch Endangered, maybe they're like, let's publish a few more let's do one more print run of the original #1 for whatever, bonus reasons. That'll be the only other time it prints. So that there's different approaches, and they all yield different results. Like I like the exploring. You brought up having them in the shops is huge, because I also have had many experiences in comic shops where I'm like, oh, but what is this like random? I've never heard of this. This is interesting. And a lot of the times that's kind of what I do nowadays. Like I go to, especially if it's a shop I haven't been to, my first question is, do you have an indie like small press section? And my second question is, do you have like a discounted like rando one shot, it's something that's just not part of the regular stock? And
bless you for that, by the way. Bless you for that.
Well, and that's what I find, all the interesting stuff there. I find tons of interesting stuff. I picked up just like a stack of they're indie books. They were published through like Image and a couple smaller publishers, but then I've never heard of them. I was very much a situation where I'm like, I've never heard of these books. I don't even know like the context of these books. So I just wanted to see him like, let's just give it a shot, let's just see what's going on. And that could be somebody's campaign from who knows, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And I'm gonna be, once I read it, I'm gonna do a review on TikTok or on the on the podcast or whatever, and they're gonna be like, oh shit, like if they, if it comes across their feed, they'll be like, oh wow, like it's still out there, it's still in the wild. Like that, I think that's an interesting experience from both ends of that. Is I get to see something really interesting that maybe, I mean, there's even certain books that the people aren't even doing comics anymore.
Yeah.
One of my favorite books that is like
Probably be a
that is
lot more of those soon, I would imagine. Unfortunately, I think we're at a point of attrition right now. I think it applies to comic book stores and comic book creation on the indie level. I think people are feeling it, and that will weed out a lot of folks. They're going to be like, I'm done with this.
I think there's different things that I think there's different approaches that need to be kind of embraced. That's why I'm such a big proponent of digital copies. Like the amount of indie creators that still do not sell digital copies blows my fucking mind.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely blows my mind. And then on the same level, whenever I see somebody's new campaign and I check it out, and I can't, like, if I was to get it, I can't get every add-on on every tier.
Right.
Crime. Right.
If
I want the digital copy of your one shot, but I also want to get the trade from your last volume, just let me do that.
Yep. I talked to a friend about that the other day, man. I mean, Loup Garou was the first time I ever did it, did Kickstarter, and I really enjoyed it a lot. The plan for me going forward is, like I mentioned earlier, a cover for our books will go to previews, go for Diamond. All variant offering, and I'm not one of these 10 variant covers per comic book guy. I'm not that dude. I typically don't want to do more than like 2 per book. After that, I start to feel it gets a little bit kind of weird, or like funky.
But are you dipping your toes into the NSFW covers? That's the market these days.
Dude, I saw him on there. I was like, my God. I was actually joking with my business partner, Nathan, a couple of days ago. And I said, dude, we should really hire one of these like NSFW artists and just do one of these big boob cover for the Dirt Witch where she looks all sexy, and then they open that thing up and they're like, what the fuck?
This has nothing to do with this. But
just
that's the thing is, how often, I always wonder, like, how often are the people that buy these variant covers how often are they even opening the book?
Dude, that would be a documentary that I would love to watch, was who is buying these books, because your first knee-jerk reaction is that some like, probably 50-year-old pervert somewhere. But if I had to guess, I would bet, and I don't know, I'm just as completely off the top of my head, going solely off of just intuition. I would bet you probably 80% of those sales are from girls buying those books. I don't know why.
Really?
Yeah, dude. Every time I'm in a live comic sale and buying, because I'm a collector myself, anytime one of those types of books comes up, it's almost always a female in the room that buys it. I don't know what it is about it, but and it's oddly enough, there's some of those, quite a few of those NSFW creators I've looked up are women, who are making these like just completely like raunchy books. I've never read one; it's not my jam personally. But I'm also, let me preface that by saying, I don't judge anyone. You like what you like, right?
Yeah, for sure.
My wife loved Twilight. I'm not a fan, but I'm not going to mock Twilight fans, because I like a bunch of goofy shit.
But you will mock her privately for it.
I will tease her for Twilight and New Kids on the Block obsession that she has. But trust me, she gives as good as she gets. But so listen, if you like those books, Godspeed. I mean, then you have the kind of hybrid model between the two, which are your Brian Pulido fans, your Lady Death fans, because then you're kind of doing like NSFW books, but there's also a little bit more to it than that, than just the visuals. So yeah, I've never read
Lady Death was always like, when I was a young kid, when I first saw it like advertised in Wizard, I was like, oh man, like I wonder how, like, what the story is or whatever. But like obviously all I wanted to see was look at the boobies, right? And then as I
Those stories
grew
are
up,
hardcore, man. From what I gather, like Evil
and then
Ernie and
as
all
I
that
grew up,
stuff.
I was like, I want nothing to do with this.
Yeah,
And when he sold off the rights, I don't even remember why that happened because he's got him back now. So it's one of those like weird cycle things. But whenever he sold off the rights and CrossGen had it, she was like a medieval knight kind of thing. And
yeah.
I actually read that book. It was really good, but they never
Yeah.
finished it. So I was just
I mean,
mad.
her origin story. I know about the character. Her origin story is really cool. I mean, the concepts of it are really, really neat. So there's actually some story there. So that's what I was saying earlier. That's kind of the hybrid. That's the NSFW benefit plus this, like,
Right.
that's been out now for what, 30 years probably. So
Right.
you got a lot of lore behind the book, but he kills it, dude. I'm telling you, on Kickstarter and at conventions. I mean, you go by the Coffin Comics booth and you're like, my God, he does not believe in the 2 to 3 variant covers per issue. But listen, he
Most people who do
making
those
money.
kinds of covers don't, but
Yeah,
if that's where the money is, that's where the money is. Like
make the
I
money, dude.
completely understand chasing the money, secure the bag. That's all I
Yeah.
always say. Secure the
Hey,
bag. However that happens,
like I said, dude, I don't
you're
judge.
gonna have, if 30 people, 50 people back your campaign, and those are the people that want to read the story, and if 100 more people back the campaign and buy the titty cover,
Yep.
and that gets you across the finish line, congratulations, you're making comics.
Yeah, dude. No, listen, no judgment. Dude, do your thing, man. I mean, it's not, when I say it's not my thing, I'm definitely not judging those who do it. I mean, hey, that it's so funny when I would just look through a Kickstarter. I'm going through Kickstarter, like ending soon or whatever, just seeing if there's a book I'd like to back or something. Man, every one you look at, it's like, 1100%, funded or whatever. It's always one of those books. It's all,
Oh, for
unless
sure.
it's Neil Gaiman's book or Frank Cho's book or whatever. But yeah, it's crazy, man. They kill it. So that's the market. It's not the stories that I want to tell. I don't have a story in mind for that. I did have one that my business partner, after funny enough, after seeing the success of those books have on Kickstarter, I had this idea years ago, and it was kind of a joke, honestly, but it was just completely like black humor from my EMS history. I was like, I want to make a book, and the title of it is going to be Dick Baker, Camel Toe Maker, and the whole concept. And I might still do it. Somebody steal my fucking idea. So the whole concept, though, is it's this guy who was born with this giant dong, right? He's the greatest porn star who's ever lived, but he doesn't like doing porn. He wants to be a serious actor. So he's trying to transition out of that world into being like a true thespian, So kind of like Barry, if you ever watch Barry on HBO, it's a similar concept like that, like this kind of, I don't really want to do this anymore, but this is what I was made to do, because I
Right.
was allowed so, fortuitously. So yeah, I might still do that one day. He was like, do we need to do that damn camel toe maker book just to go after that NSFW audience? But that was the only thing I've ever even had close to that. But that's again, it was almost a joke. It was never really like a serious concept of doing a comic with that, but who knows? Shit, maybe we'll do it one of these days. But
You know what? I've backed a few campaigns that had those covers and stuff like that, and the first time I did it, I was like, I'm so curious. Like, it was almost like a morbid curiosity, like, how much of it is this?
yeah,
Because I'm like, is this just gonna be like a shitty porn
right.
comic that I'm buying? But it was called B Mecha, I think, and I was like, I like mechs. I'm like, maybe there will be like a scene of mechs or something. Maybe, who
Yeah.
knows, right? I had no idea. Most of that book is mech battles, and there's
Yeah.
like 1.5 scenes where it's like NSFW, and I was like, I mean, you're selling the least parts to
Yeah.
make the book happen to get me to read a mech book. Okay.
I will give them this much credit, man. That's some solid artwork. I mean, they're doing some really good artwork. It's in a style or in a vein that I don't typically gravitate towards. But I mean, you can't deny that, even the ones that I've looked through on there and just been like, what in the hell? How do these guys have $37,000 come for this book? And you go through there and they'll show some of the interior pages. And you're like, damn, okay, this is actually some pretty solid art. So it's a whole subgenre, man. And I would almost say that if you were able to go through and look at the past, probably, I don't know, 5 years of kickstarted comic books and took the ones who were NSFW funded books, I mean, I would have to believe that that's probably a big chunk of the total dollars from comics that have been raised on that platform. because, like I said, they all kill it on there every time you see one. It'd be interesting to see that data.
It'd be them, Magnetic Press, and Boom Studios.
Yeah, that's true. Boom,
Because Magnetic and Boom, they put those advertising dollars in. Because I'll tell you what, man, I love like Magnetic's production quality. Like their hardcovers are just out of this world. I've always said that if when it comes time, I would love to go through them because I know the book's going to succeed because they fund in like 12 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And
They spend
B,
all that
like
money though.
everything they bring with it, like all the bonus material, like this is just from a recent campaign from one
Nice.
that came through, and it's like it's such a it's a simple little thing. It's nothing fucking too fancy. It's just a keychain bottle opener, but I'm like, it's just like a nice little. It feels like a higher value. I mean, they also like whip out like mad challenge coins that are really really well done.
Yeah.
So I mean, like they've got these like pipelines of where they get their stuff, and it's like, oh, we've got a new campaign. I don't even see. I don't even. There's not even time for me to like see it on Twitter or Instagram or even on Kickstarter. I'm getting an ad on Facebook.
Yeah.
They've got the ad. Like they've got great marketing people. So
Yeah.
does Boom Studios. Like Boom
Yeah.
Studios. I didn't know they were putting out another Power Rangers campaign, and then I'm on Facebook and it was like boom. And it was like all the books that they ever like all the old books from the 90s and everything, early 2000s before they owned the license, like they're collecting them. And I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
It was a little too expensive for my
Well, those, hey, Ross Ritchie and those guys, they got the money to do that stuff, man. But that goes back to what you're saying though with Magnetic and all those guys. That's the part that I've really found on Kickstarter as a creator that I really like and that I really look forward to doing more with future books on. Is you're able to do something that's so like would never work on the comic shop model, where you have your reader coming right to you and you can offer them something cool, because we're going to be doing some really cool, like the stuff you were showing there. We're going to be doing some really cool stuff with this next campaign. And the Loup Garou campaign was fun, and it wasn't like just a fluke, but I mentioned to people before, it was really an experiment, for me to learn the platform, see what works, see what doesn't work, and this, that, and the other, and then go a little bit bigger for the next one. So I've got some really cool plans for this next one. And again, it's really cool to me to be able to offer that, like you're saying, like to those guys to do something like that. They can't add a bottle opener to a book that's going to Diamond, into a comic book store.
Right.
It doesn't work. And there's so many different reasons why that wouldn't work. But on a platform like a Kickstarter, it's directly you going with your readers and your fans, or whatever you want to call it. I always feel weird calling people fans. I don't feel like we've put out enough stuff yet to earn fans. So I always usually refer to people as readers or supporters, but it gives you that ability to directly provide them with something really cool. I mean, you're going to give them the comic book, which is the core of it, but you could do so much more fun stuff around that, and that's to me the biggest appeal that I found from that platform. Because my buddy worries about all the money stuff. I don't do that as much. I mean, my thing is like, if we making something that's successful and people like it, then it's gonna, you're gonna start to see a return eventually. So I don't dwell too much on the financial side of it. I dwell on the creative side of it, and from that crowdfunding platform, being able to do those really cool stuff like you were talking about with those guys, that I really like a lot. It's really, really cool to me.
And that gives the people who back on the Kickstarter the more special, more unique experience than the people who will get it at the comic shop. Even let's say it sells 1,000, 5,000 copies at the comic shop. Those are people who are getting the comic shop experience. They're going to their local comic shop, picking up a comic. Oh, this looks interesting. Cool. I'm going to put it in the bag.
Yeah.
And the people who backed on the Kickstarter are like, they have that, but they're getting the little inside story. Maybe they're getting a behind the scenes. They're getting, all this little stuff. And I mean, like, it's stupid because I have a million of them, but like bookmarks, I will say, if you're gonna do bookmarks, I do love the metal print bookmarks.
Metal, okay,
this is nice.
All right,
Big
that
fan,
actually looks really nice.
And but yeah, I mean, like, just you get some bookmarks out of a campaign, like that's cool, especially if it's like a cool moment from the book, or like it's not just, oh, I cropped the cover and put it on a thing.
For sure,
there's something to it. There's something a little extra. I mean, again, to call out, Magnetic, but this was from the Mezcal Convoy campaign, but it's like a golden ticket. It's like embossed.
Oh yeah. That's
it's just like a
nice.
silly little thing, but like I opened it, I'm
Oh, it's
like, oh man,
cool.
and it's numbered 20 of 100. I was like, that's super awesome. Like
Yeah,
it's just like a
really cool.
neat little collectible thing,
Yeah.
and it's like it's
It makes the
tchotchkes.
experience, it makes the experience of you're getting more than just the comic book,
Right.
and then listen, that's why I like another thing I like about Kickstarter, and is it the theory is that it will also help the retailer, because I typically want to have mine. I'm going to be scheduling them so that they're occurring right before the book would come out in a comic shop, so that the comic shops will be getting the books first, before the fulfillment from Kickstarters will be going out to the backers. So when you're pushing that, it's that last minute push where people could still go in there and order the A cover from their comic shop. Because let's be
Right.
real, you're going to get your book through the comic shop a hell of a lot cheaper than you can get one on Kickstarter. Just the
For sure.
reality behind it. That was another
Are
thing
you
at the beginning.
offering the A cover through the Kickstarter at all?
No, no, I won't.
Oh, okay.
I did Loup Garou. Well, no, it still worked out. I did. I offered Loup Garou a cover as an add-on in the Loup Garou campaign, because at that time when I added it, didn't start the campaign didn't start with it. When I added it, the order cutoff had already occurred, so it would. I never want to compete with comic shops. I have a shop locally to me, and they pointed this out to me, and I was like, wow, I didn't ever really thought about it this way. No, nothing offensive intended toward the parties involved, but they weren't really going to mess with Scout books anymore, because I was like, wow, why is that? They felt that Scout, and they do, directly competes with them, because you can buy all your Scout books through Scout's website. You don't have to go to a
Sure.
comic shop. There's no exclusivity offered to the comic store. And their thing was like, we're not going to compete. If we feel like we're having to compete with the publisher for sales, then we're not going to support that publisher. Whatever. That's their choice. I'm not
Right.
saying it's right or it's wrong, but when they pointed that out to me, I was
It's an
like, yeah,
interesting point.
I like I mentioned earlier, I really try to work hard to be as much of a partner to the retailers who are ordering my stuff as I can. And the last thing I want to do is mess them up at all.
Right.
I'm the opposite of that. I want to try to, my goal is for whatever copies of my book, whether it's 2 or 10 that they ordered, I want them to sell out of them,
Right.
because, that's my, what's that? They sell 10 of them, they've made what, $25, at that at their discount. So they're not retiring on anything, but
Right.
it helps a little bit, And again, just like I mentioned before, is I love comic book stores, so I don't want to see them go out of business. So I don't want my books to be sitting on their shelves, and even at the small amount of an impact that it is financially to them, if they don't sell, that's a hurt. It's not helping them in any way. So I plan on doing mine so that there's still the window of time is there, for that you could, say you want to, the Dirt Witch comes out and you're like, oh, this looks pretty cool. I'm down with it. My hope is that you will pre-order the A cover through your comic book store, because I will not be offering it in the Kickstarter. Now, if like with Loup Garou, that cutoff date where it could no longer be ordered through comic book shops has passed, people miss out. They didn't know about it at the time, whatever it might be. Then I will add it on there and say, if you missed out on it, you can't order it in your comic book store anymore, but here's the opportunity to get it in case you want it, because it's typically a $5. This one will probably be like $6 because it's going to be a 32-page book. But so yeah, my thing is always to try, and I want to partner with the retailer as much as I can,
Sure.
because I made some relationships with some of these dudes, man. There's some of them that are really, really cool, who anytime I call them, hey, they don't recognize my voice, but when I'm, hey, it's John from Endangered, John from Comic Book Trivia. Oh, hey, what's up, John? You got a new book out coming out? Yeah, man. What page is it on? Here. All right, cool. We're gonna put a couple in. So that's awesome. And again, I don't want to do anything to mess that up. I kind of want to just continue to grow that, hopefully with other stores and stuff, because it's word of mouth spreads, and just like with readers, it's just a slow process. If a lot of those shop owners know each other, I can't tell you how many of those guys were like, yeah, man, I'm going to order a few, but hey, you know what? I got a buddy of mine who owns a shop in, I'm talking to somebody in Oklahoma, and they're like, my friend owns a shop in Rhode Island. I think he'd probably be down with this too. Here's his information. Tell him I sent you, that's happened several times. So it all kind of works together and helps
For
out a
sure.
lot.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So with with the Dirt Witch, let's give a little context. What's the story about? What's the premise? You said it's a one shot,
Yep.
32 pages. When's
Yeah.
it going to be on Kickstarter? Let's start there.
So I just talked to Bloodman the other day. We've submitted everything to them, so it will be in the February previews catalog, which means it will be coming in comic book stores. The release date I think is going to be the end of April, because I wanted to kind of make it as close to Free Comic Book Day as possible for obvious reasons. So that's when it will be there. So we're going to run the Kickstarter throughout March. So what this story is, and every time I talk like this, people I think I'm blowing smoke or being a salesman. It's true. I'm really excited about this book. My editor, who she's more of a grammar Nazi. She's not a traditional comic book editor. She just goes to clean up all my freaking grammar and typos and stuff. But she's read everything I've written in the past like 15 years, and she's like, I don't mean to take anything away from the other stuff you've done, but this is the best story you've ever written. And it is a really good story. So the concept is basically there's this kid who's bullied terribly, and his best friend is a little bit older guy who works at a record store. And after one of the days where he's really been kind of persecuted pretty bad by these bullies, he's kind of going into his buddy's store just kind of hang out, and his head's hung down, and his friend was like, oh man, cheer up, it'll be all right. And he's like, hey, by the way, check this out. He goes, have you ever heard of black metal? And the kid's like, what are you talking about? He's like, Norwegian death metal. Are you familiar with it? And he's like, I don't know what it is. So his friend winds up showing him. He tells him the story of how he went on the dark web and bought this copy of this record from this Norwegian death metal band, who were all found massacred when they after they recorded it. And so, he tells them that the record was still spinning on the recording table when they went in and found this band was torn to pieces. And supposedly the rumor is they found a way to summon this demonic entity, and they put it into the record. So he buys this record off the dark web, and he's telling his buddy about it, and he's like, did you listen to it? He's like, yeah, it kind of sucks. He's like, but if there's one thing I know about death metal, is that if you want to put a spell like that in there, you have to play it backwards. And he's like, well, have you played it backwards? He's like, hell no, I'm not doing that. So this kid winds up taking the record and naturally plays it backwards. And then this creature kind of gets bonded to him. And terrible things happen when she shows up. You saw the newsletter. You guys were the only ones that got privy to what she looks like. She's a really, really menacing creature. It's something I'm really excited about. I really wanted to kind of make my contribution for a new monster or a new creature for the world of horror, something that was original. And I think we definitely accomplished that. And like I mentioned in the last time we did the newsletter, was I set out to do these one shots with the challenge that I really wanted to try to make a scary comic. It's hard to do that. It sounds easy, but it's hard to do it because you're so limited on the medium that you're using. Right. You don't have most of the valuable tools that movies use to do that, or even novels. You can kind of tell what people are thinking. In comics, you don't really have that much luxury with all the extra words and stuff available. So all you have available to you is make a cool looking creature and try to use your character building and then your page turns and things like that to create rising tension and dread and things like that. So I've read a lot of horror comics. I've read some really good ones, but I don't remember reading any of them that I thought was scary. I don't think Loup Garou is super scary. There's a few moments in there that are like, whoa. Signal 29 turned out to not really be scary. It was just more like crazy zombie stuff. This one I think might have the potential to actually have accomplished that a little bit. I think there's some creepy moments in there. It's a lot more of a darker story, but yet a lot of heart in it. I mean, ultimately it comes down, what I tell people is it's a story about consequences. You make the wrong, you turn right instead of turning left. It's a butterfly effect. So every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and that's kind of what happens in this story. And you see it on multiple levels throughout the story. The biggest, obviously, being his decision to play that record backwards because he's just in a really dark place at that time. But there's multiple other instances throughout the story that you'll see where. And it actually opens talking about that, like how many choices does a person make in a day? 1 million, 1 billion. You never think about what would happen if you went the other way on what you chose to do, So that was kind of the ultimate analysis that I was going for in the story. So I'm really, really excited about it. It's a really solid horror story. And but that's kind of what it's about. And it's a little bit more also about, like, again, the consequences from the bully's perspective. What happens when you do something like that to a person,
Right.
sometimes karma comes back and literally bites you bites you in the ass. But yeah, so that's what the comic is about. And then I recently came up with this idea for the Kickstarter. I was like, again, going back after I did the Loup Garou and kind of seeing what would work or not, and really kind of developing a new appreciation for that platform. Another thing I used to love a lot as a kid is a choose your own adventure type of thing. So when you read the Dirt Witch, the reader could, at the end of that, come away with two things. That you can either come away thinking maybe there really wasn't a monster. Maybe what we're being shown here is just someone's like madness, or maybe there really was a monster that was summoned. This creature came out, So I decided I kind of wanted to explore that a little bit more. So we're doing a special version of the book for the Kickstarter. That's the working title right now is Believe It or Not, where you, the reader, will have to commit on, if you choose to go to that platform, that tier, you'll have to commit on which way you want to see the story in. And it's a bonus chapter that will kind of end with different perspectives on things, so that's pretty exciting. The other thing is I wanted to make it a little bit more of an interactive experience with a comic. Typically you read what's in front of you, and it's active in the sense that you're having to read the story, but for the most part it's a passive thing. You're digesting a story. You're not having to make that choice, and again, the whole point of the book is about making a choice. So I was like, it'd be super cool to make a version of it where the reader has to make a choice and see which way that it goes, So that's going to be available on there. I'm really super stoked because we're going to do, I'll tell you here, we're going to do the big tier level. The deluxe version that we're going to do is going to be a large size format book that's going to come inside of a record sleeve, where we're going to read a record from the book. So it'll come sealed in a vinyl record jacket or whatever you want to call it.
That's cool.
Yeah, with a bunch of other stuff like what you were showing there. It's going to come with a bunch of other stuff like that. Because one thing I learned about Loup Garou is I don't feel like the stretch goals held a whole lot of like value as far as like getting people like, come on, let's go team, so I wanted going forward to this next one, I'm sure there'll still be a stretch goal of some level, but the main thing is going to be at the tier levels will come with the extra stretch goal type stuff, like what you're showing there, where you're just going to get it. If you go with that deluxe edition, you're going to get all of this kind of cool shit. I mean, we're trying to convince my partner to make a freaking mask, because I saw one campaign, I backed it actually. One of their like $50 tier levels was you actually get a wearable latex mask of their bad guy. Oh, that was pretty cool. I'd never seen that before on there. I didn't get it at that level, but it was still pretty cool idea. So I don't know if we'll do that or not, but
I'm a fan of getting something out of it. I don't know if you know Ben Krieger, Frontier Forever. I've been trying to get him to get a tier with a hat, like a leather hat.
nice.
I've done the research for him. I found a couple companies that do custom leather work and stuff like that. But his whole thing is like a futuristic type Western thing with this character called the Marshal. She's actually on that box up there.
Oh, okay.
But she's got this hat on, and I was like, oh man, like that'd be a heavy tier. That'd be like because those are expensive. Those are expensive.
Yeah.
It's like $400. I'm like, but if you put a $400 tier on, like if you got the trade paperback going on, your lowest tier is 20, 30 bucks. So 400 isn't a crazy tier. I've seen higher for.
Well, the cool thing from his perspective is you do it, and then you don't have to make them if no one buys them.
Exactly. You don't have to put the order in. You just get
like
it quoted out.
Yeah, it'd just be a one-off, so you're not having to worry about. Because one thing we wanted to do, and we're still looking into it, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to do it, is make one of these really cool, like magnetic closing boxes. With the comic art all over it, that the books would come in at a certain tier. Your books are going to come inside this cool looking ass Dirt Witch box. But something like that, you have to really be careful, because, typically that's going to be like a minimum of a 100 quantity that you have to commit to,
right.
Put the tiers on there. but the first person that pledges at that level, you have to make those boxes. And then if you only get one, then you're going to be sitting on 99, 99
Yeah,
boxes.
but that's
$1,000
I mean, I don't know how
a
much I don't know how many conventions you're doing, but that's a big give. That's a big
Oh
get at
yeah.
a convention.
Oh
Like
yeah.
if
No,
you
no,
can
that was factored in for sure. I see those and I tell him, I'm like, that's great because people, even if they're not interested in your book as much, they'll buy that book because then they can throw all their other old Spider-Man books in there that they bought for the show and camera. I don't have to worry about them getting smashed up and things like that, you know. So
right.
usually every time I go to a show, I have a box like that in my backpack to protect the books in there. So no, it's something that we are hopefully going to do. We're just talking to some companies about it. But yeah, something like that hat. I mean, that's the cool thing about Kickstarter, man. I mean, and the other weird thing too is you sometimes as the creator, you're like, oh man, and I don't know if he experiences this or not, but I mean, he might, you know, you're like, I don't want to do that. I don't think nobody cares enough about my stuff to spend on something like that, you know. So sometimes I think we become our own worst enemies as insecure creators, you know. You're like, nobody cares that much, you know, they don't want to buy the cool hat for my character. So I like a lot of doing what, and that's what we're doing it with this Dirt Witch campaign. I love being able to incorporate something that feels like it's from the book, you know. So even if it's just a little, like you said, a little tchotchke or something like that, like for instance in Loup Garou, I really wanted to do this and I had it on the stretch goal originally and it didn't quite get there. But the whole concept of that comic book is this reality TV show crew are in the swamps of Louisiana filming this show called Bayou Life. And then they encounter this werewolf and horrible things happen. But I wanted to offer up like, so the backer was basically getting like a crew gift, like if Bayou Life was a real TV show, you know, stuff like that. I love
That's
doing stuff like
cool.
that. So I think you can do, and that's kind of what I want to do with this record cover. And we're going to do some more kind of stuff like that for this Dirt Witch campaign. But I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be from just taking what I learned from Loup Garou and making it a cooler experience for the backers. Hopefully will be well received. And I'm actually really excited about doing it. You know, it's going to be pretty cool.
That's awesome. That's
That's what the
awesome.
book's about. It's drawn by this Greek artist, Thomas Tikos, who drew the Signal 29 book, the zombie book that we did a couple months ago. Great freaking artist. Inked by Larry Welch, who inked Endangered, and he also inked Loup Garou. And then our colorist is this guy in Spain, Hob, who is man, he's fantastic. Unfortunately, he's saying as of right now, this will probably be the last comic he colors, which is a true travesty because he is a freaking maestro. I think he's
Dang.
one of the best colorists out there. But he said he wants to pursue something a little bit more of like a stable profession, which I understand.
Understandable.
But man, hopefully he'll get his profession going. He'll still make some time to color comics on the side.
Right.
Wizard, dude. Yeah, he's
Well,
really good. The book will
that's
look beautiful. I can tell you that much.
I'm excited to check that out. That's what I was going to bring up earlier. I was saying, you know, sometimes these creators disappear out of the industry because one of my favorite books is The Red Star. When it came out, it was an it was an Image publication. This guy, Chris something, I forgot his name even. He put this book out and there's like a lot of 3D like backgrounds and stuff like that. Like he put a lot of work into this book. It's massive. It came in this like huge format. I love it. And he doesn't exist in comics anymore. As far as I can tell, I think it's his LinkedIn. I think he works at some like game company. You know, he's doing a day job paying the bills. And
I've experienced that myself, man. Yeah, you go and
I
find a
picked
book.
up the last book. I picked up the last book that I needed to complete the set, and it was signed. And I was just like, "Oh, this is insane!" Because like I could have never have gotten any of the other ones signed because this dude doesn't exist. He's not doing cons or anything.
Dude, it's rough, man. I mean, I've done that before. I found an old book that I was like, "Holy shit, who drew this?" And then I'll go try to track them down, and they're like, you know, doing some sort of ad work or graphic illustration for some, you know, Fortune 500 company or something these days, and they don't deal with comic books at all. Fortunately for me, is I'm doing this on the back end. I've been a paramedic since 1997. I'm not going to retire anytime soon, unfortunately, because I'm stupid and you know stayed in one place long enough to retire like that. But I just spent the past like probably 15 years getting to this point. I think that's another thing you risk when somebody goes into this a little bit too early, because again, it is brutal, man. And it's real easy to be like, dude, this is just not worth my time, you know, anymore. So fortunately, the world that I'm coming from, like big problems in the world of comics aren't shit. I mean, it's like, come on, I'm not going to get stressed about this. It's
Right.
compared to the stuff I've seen and dealt with before. But it's tough, man. It can be a tough pill to swallow. So I feel sometimes if you get into it too early, you can get consumed by it and just, your bones left to the side, and you have to heal and kind of move on and find something else to do that's not quite as because rejection, I mean, it takes a while, dude, to get used to that. I mean, again, I feel like I'm in kind of a unique spot as a creator because, like I said, I've been a paramedic for so long, and that's been such a high stress, crazy job. I was a professional actor for a couple of years with SAG, and that
Oh
gets you
wow.
really conditioned for the rejection as well. And then the literary work, I've been rejected through there on other stuff after my published book. And but comics is always what I wanted to do anyway. All of that stuff was to get me to the point of where I could hopefully make comic books professionally. So now I'm not going anywhere, barring not being able to pay for the books to be made. I'll still be writing them. So
Right.
hopefully I'll be around for several more years making cool books. But we'll see. But yeah, unfortunately, it can eat you up, man. It gets a little old after a while. It's like getting kicked in the sack over and over and over. It's coming back out and being like, here it is again, baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
No
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah, I mean it's a big space. I mean, there are people who they've been chugging along, and it's they're putting out one book if you're lucky a year, as a fan. And there are people who came in and they're just like, oh, this is nothing. And they're whipping out monthly books, and you're just like, fucking how? Like, how is
It
this
must be an
divide so
artist.
wide?
It must be an artist. That was the only way I could think you could possibly do.
I'm not sure. I gotta get him on the show. Millennium Comics. I came across Delta Dogs in 2020, and I was like, oh man, how have I never heard of this? Like, this looks so cool. It's like, you know, these kids get powers from this alien or possibly alien. I haven't even gotten that far. Like, as far as I finished the first arc, and it's a great book, but I think it was an alien, if I recall correctly. But I was like, this is a dope concept. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, they've got 11 issues out already. Holy shit. And then I was like, when did this start? Because I'm thinking 2006, 2004,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh no, this started last year. And I was like, what the fuck is happening right now?
Dude, he either has to be an artist, or it has to be like a dude with a friend who are like a jam band creative team where you just financially, I can't imagine being able to do
Right.
that. Like from where I'm at. I mean, I
It's
always had
got to
the
be something with a zero upfront cost for the art for sure. At least
and then
for like pencils and inks.
you have to be pretty tight too with the person. If it's not just one dude doing everything, I mean, if it's a writer and an artist team, they probably most likely I would be willing to bet are friends who probably live in the same town and who are like, yeah, bro, let's just make comic books.
Right.
Like I used to play D&D. Those dudes are just getting together and just cranking out their stories. But hell, dude, that's awesome, man. Yeah, to be able to do that, especially put out a good book like that. It's
Yeah. Well, that's
easier
the
to
thing.
chat out.
I always get, I'll give it, I'll give a taste. I'll grab the first issue digitally, and it's like, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Let me get a few more. Like, I got a couple. I'll always give every comic series 3 issues.
Yeah, it's fair.
And I picked up 2 and 3, and before the end of the second issue, I was like, I'm already in. Like, let me get the rest of this first arc.
I have to find it. What's the name of it?
It's called Delta Dogs.
Delta Dogs. Okay, I'm gonna have to try to track this cats down.
Yeah, Millennium Comics. That is outstanding. I was just like, I was blown away by how quickly I was like hooked in and bought into the story. And
A good one.
that's a rare quality in writing in general. Not even just indie comics, and many comics. It's hard to like 2-3 issues. I mean, like, and to give a mainstream example, I love Jonathan Hickman's writing. Like, I think he revolutionized X-Men. I read Ultimate
Daredevil.
Invasion, and I was like, like,
Right.
like, and I'm not gonna, not everyone's gonna be a hit every time out, but I'm like, this was like the big thing. They've been hyping this up for months. It was like, I read the whole run, and I was like, what happened? What was this book about? I don't really understand what's going on.
Sometimes
like, it felt like in issue 1, they felt like some stuff was gonna happen, and then none of it really happened.
Sometimes when you're doing stuff on that level, again, I can only assume because I've never obviously been at something like that, but I would imagine it's similar to like why some of those movies come out and are just garbage. Sometimes you get a poor editor on board or some kind of core, you're making a book for the machine with that one, so you're gonna have a lot of hands stirring the pot. So who
Well,
freaking
that's the
knows?
thing, and he flipped it back around because God's number one, his other new book at Marvel, fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic book, and it was like a self-contained issue, which made me even more curious because I think it's a mini series.
Yeah.
So like the first issue ends, and I was like, oh, this story's complete. What happens next? Like, wait, if this what is going on with the rest of the story? Because I'm like, now I'm really bought in. So it's like I didn't understand how that was from the same writer. I was like, how is like this whole arc, this whole mini series of Ultimate Invasion? I was like, meh, like the whole time.
I always get him and Matt Fraction mixed up on their indie stuff. Fraction did Sex Criminals, right?
Yes.
Did Hickman do East of West? Was that a Hickman story? He did
Let
one
me
of
look
those
that up.
like highly regarded like indie books from a little while back. I can't remember what his big indie title was. The dude I've been jamming on lately is freaking Tom King, man. I read that damn Mr. Miracle that he did with Mitch
Yeah, it
Gerard.
was Hickman, East of West.
East to West. Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's where you can a lot of times find those dudes like heart and souls in those, in those books.
Yeah.
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 Sometimes
The indie stuff is very interesting. That's why I was really hyped when he was like gonna go do his own thing, and with the three worlds, three moons or whatever. I was really into that because I was like, this is the first writer that I've genuinely been like, I really like this writer. Because for me, most comics have been like I attach to like the property. So
right,
like I'm an X-Men fan till I die. Yeah,
right,
some of it's gonna be better, some of it's gonna be worse, but I'm gonna read all of it because I'm an X-Men fan.
right.
And that's the thing for me is like I will read Spider-Man, I will read Avengers, Fantastic Four, huge Justice League fan. Like I the writer, man, I don't really care.
Right.
But like
They're like studio musicians, That's what I always tell people. It's like, it's like Kiss, when they just cycle through the different dudes they were in the same makeup, but it's a different guitar player. You just plug and play,
did
baby. Plug and
because
play.
didn't one of them die? Like one of the original guys die?
I don't think so. I don't.
But oh, okay.
I'm
See,
not
I
a
thought
huge Kiss
because I
fan.
know like with Journey, like they keep changing
Yeah.
the voice actor, or not the voice actor, the singer, because the main dude died, the original dude died.
No, he's still alive, Steve Perry. That one, I think it might have been the same thing with Kiss. I think that came down to like fuck you, no, fuck you, one of those types of situations. This is my band. No, it's not, it's my band.
Oh geez.
Now, Queen, yeah, Freddie Mercury died, so now they kind of do the same thing, where or Leonard.
Oh, maybe I was conflating it with Queen. Okay.
Those cats do all that kind of stuff. But yeah, but it's with Kiss, it's like you want to hear rock and roll all night, party every day, and it doesn't really matter as much who's playing the guitar that time around, as long as they can keep it in tune. So that's kind of when you're reading those titles, that's kind of what you're expecting. Just keep the train on the tracks, man. I love Cyclops. He's been in the book for 50, 60 years now. Let's just don't do anything stupid. Sometimes they
Yeah.
do stupid.
Yeah, I mean, and they'll do something stupid, and like there was that run right before the Hickman arc started, where they like a bunch of people died, and it was a weird book, man. It was a strange book, and it's definitely one of those books where I'm like, I'm probably gonna have to reread that entire run just to see if there is any point, because
Right.
it felt like it was just like Cyclops loses an eye, Wolfsbane dies, like just a bunch of stuff. I was like, why? What is happening right now?
Right.
And then Hickman came in, and I was like, this is fantastic. I love everything that's happening right now.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, no, I'm usually a big fan of like the property like that. So that's the thing for me is if I almost want the writing and the even the artness to a point to be almost like CG in movies, right? The best CG in movies you never see. You never notice it's there.
Right.
And I want that. I don't want to be reading a book and be like, oh, well, this is clearly like, even if I didn't read the credits, oh, well, this is a Warren Ellis book.
Yeah.
Because, XYZ is happening, or XYZ is saying this thing.
Right.
I want to be in the story. That's always my thing. Is I want to be lost in the story. That's why I like Delta Dogs so much. Is I grabbed it and I was just bought into the story. I was curious about these characters, their history. They're all family, they're cousins. So I'm like, oh, like there's a little bickering. Like I see, this dude's kind of
I
the
want to read that
recluse.
now,
Like
man. Yeah, I want to check that out for sure.
it's like
It sounds like my life.
that's the kind of thing that hooks me. Like same thing with the Danny's book, Ace Blade. Like the characters are what draws me in. I don't. Whereas like I have no fucking clue what's happening in King Supreme. I've talked to Danny and I was like, what the fuck is this book about, dude? I've read both issues twice. I have no clue what's going on, dude. And he's like, you gotta wait, some stuff coming up. I was like, okay.
Hey, that dude is, I don't know. I've never met him personally. He seems like a genuinely great guy, but man, he has it figured out, dude. He is really
He's hustling, man. His
yeah.
TikTok grind is incredible.
He does a
The
good job too. I mean, the stuff I haven't read Ace Blade yet. It's on my list to do. I know they got their crowd. I think their issue 7 or something's running
It's
now.
fully funded. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So he's killing it. It's one of those books that I want to go back and check out because he not so much even because I care that much about the comic. It's a superhero comic. It's nice to hear that it's good, but I want to support him as a creator because he seems like a genuinely cool dude. You see him
For
on
sure.
the videos doing his fulfillment stuff with his kids in the room and all that. I mean, he's a cool guy, man. He seems like a really good dude.
He's putting in the work. He's always doing interesting stuff, and it's like he does these interesting skits and stuff to sell the
Yeah.
book and just to promote. Like I like the approach. The grind of it is there, and I think a lot of people forget. Like you said earlier, getting this stuff out is part of the job. It's part of what making comics is. As
Big part. Yeah.
Stokes always says, marketing is a comic book making skill. Like you need to be able to get people talking about you. And it's like I know a lot of comic book creators. I know a lot of people who put out comics, fully funded Kickstarters, and then they don't talk about their book no more.
I think that's actually you bringing that up. Another mistake that a lot of indie creators make because a lot of folks who are artists and stuff, they're a bit of introverts and they just want to tell their story and feel
Right.
like maybe if they get it with the publisher that they don't have to go in front of a camera or don't have to. That's not the reality, man. The
Not in this
publisher,
age.
especially these smaller publishers, they are not spending any money on any sort of marketing. A heavy, heavy, heavy load of that's going to fall on your shoulders. So your book's success is really going to depend on you. So you have to do that hustle. You have to, because if you don't believe in your book and you're not out there like speaking about it from your heart, not just some slicked up bullshit sales pitch, but if you're not out like passionately, talking about your work, man, who else is going to care about it? There's too much competition. You have to find a way to hook a reader before your book comes out. You think that,
Right.
oh, I can just hook them when my book comes out. No, man, they're not even going to buy it. You have to hook them before that, with something to get them to buy it. And a lot of that's going to be, like you said, with Danny, is like, I want to buy his books and support his books. And I'm sure that'll be great because he's a great dude, and it's even if the book sucks, it's like, I know that I've supported someone who's actually out here really getting it, who's
Right.
really believes in their work. They're not just cranking stuff out with a financial spreadsheet next to it. Check, yep, sold another 10. That I don't feel like that's his motivation at all. He's like, he
No,
wants to.
not at all. That's why I love every time somebody brings up, well, like the price of the book or whatever, somebody brings it up, the all how he addresses it, and he's done it 3 or 4 times now, is he just breaks down like, this is how much it costs to make the book, this is how much and like boom, 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 and that should give us just enough to keep making comics.
I think
Like,
that was his first video he made that I saw was that one. Was one of those that he talked about the price, and it really connected with me, and that's why I was like, I really like this dude, because I had just gotten done having the spiel that I told you about earlier with another creator where I'm like, bro, there's not that much money left over at these $5 diamond levels. So no, yeah, that cracks me up. If you're a fan of if you're a fan of comic books, you should never dump on someone for what they're charging for their book because of those reasons. It's tough. No one is, if you're buying someone's $10 book, they're not laughing at you as they go balling up this wad of cash in their pocket. I promise you, it's not realistic. Now, if a Spider-Man book comes out that's $10, maybe you're being played.
you can ask a few more questions because they have the marketing arm, they have the bulk volume buying print costs, like the scale of the economy of scale is always something that we need to remember, is like why is Spider-Man $10? Every Spider-Man book should be $5 or
Everyone
$3 or whatever,
less. Yeah.
like every single one, because the print cost for them per page, because they're not buying per issue. They're not
But I
buying.
bet
They sign a contract 5 years ago with a printer, and this is how much every single issue they put out is going to cost. Whether they put out Squirrel Girl random one shot or they put out a new #1 X-Men, it's going to cost them the exact same amount of money.
and I bet you it is a small amount because that's a big
dirt
contract.
cheap. Because I mean, even if you look at old numbers, which I mean, obviously the numbers are a little different these days, but at the same time, like there are 10 X-Men books, there are
Geez.
2 to 3 Avengers books at any given time. There's a Captain Marvel book every single month. There's a Captain America, at least one Captain America book every single month. Like there are all these books constantly coming out. And then it's like, oh, you've got a Moon Knight book. Well, let's do a Moon Knight miniseries as well at the same time. So like a bunch of stuff is coming out. They're putting out like the #1 selling book in the last time they all reported through Diamond, I think was 2020. Or maybe like January, February 2021, before DC left for Lunar. The #1 selling book was Amazing Spider-Man, and it was like 90,000 copies.
Yeah.
So they're getting the 90,000 copy price for even the one that sold 1,000 copies.
Right. Right. No, 100%, 100%. Yeah. So there's really no excuse for those guys to do that. I mean, I think they look at it and say, oh, well, there's going to be this big aftermarket and things like that. I mean, I don't understand their motivation. I don't agree with it. But it's when it comes to an independent creator, yeah, no one's laughing at anyone for buying a $10 book. I mean, I think it's, if anything else, you're really helping out that creator with that sale. They're not taking your money and going to a casino or pissing away on something stupid. I would be willing.
Ideally, they're just turning around making more comics, like
putting it right back into the next book. Exactly right.
My only qualm has been, and I'm gonna keep at this until I feel like we find some sort of middle ground. Me and the people who do this. There's a few publishers, a few creators that put their trades out. So after the singles have come out, because I don't bag on single costs. Single costs are single costs.
Right.
But like once you go to trade, you've already paid for the art for those books. You've already paid for the colors on those books.
Yep.
This is cake.
Yep.
This is printing costs
100%.
and cake. Yep. Don't give me a standard trade book for $50 to $60.
Absolutely not.
That's insane. That's insane. I can't. I was ready. I opened this campaign, and I had bought the art book before, and they had like talked me into it because the art book I felt a bit high, but I was like, you know what? I'm a big fan of art and process and stuff like that. So I have a ton of art books. I did it, and then I was like, oh, cool. The trade's coming out. I already have the digital copies, mind you. So I already have the story to read. Right. I really want it, but I do want a physical copy. I like trades. You see that behind me, and I was like, let me just jump on this campaign. Let's see what's going on. And I scroll down, and it's like $50 for the trade, $110 for the hardcover. And I was like, for what? Does it give me a
that's not going to cost them, dude. That at worst, they're probably going to be looking at $10, $12, if there's no like foil or emboss or any of that kind of stuff. It's not going to cost.
But, I mean, and it wouldn't have even taken a lot of like a $60 hardcover. I wouldn't have even batted my eyelashes.
Right.
It would have been like, okay, cool.
Yeah. Trade
a $30 trade, bet. Like I know, again, to go back to economy of scale, I know why a Marvel can put out 150 pages for $19.99 or $16.99 sometimes, because we talked about it. They pay a lot less for printing. So $30 for a 150 pager, no question, from an indie for me.
Well, I think when you're doing the Kickstarters too, that's an important point that you brought up, is that the benefit of what I said earlier, where you're having this like cool direct relationship with your reader or fan or whatever it is, you as the creator have a responsibility on that. And if you do stuff like that, to me, it reads as exploitive. It reads as real greed grabbing, and I don't think that's the move, dude. I think I know that there's a middle ground between you making a little bit of profit and your reader not getting shafted in the ass, and that's factored in whenever we putting our stuff together. And I look at it, I'm like, all right, so this is what it's going to cost me at this level. How much do I need to charge for at this level? And I don't factor into my mind what's the most I could charge and get away with this. It's like, what's fair, So anytime you ever see me doing one of those, everything that I'm pricing is going to be priced at a fair, what I would be comfortable paying, because when I see something like that, like you're talking about, if I saw something like that and someone tried to charge me $50 for a trade paperback, I would not be messing with them in the future. I feel personally the same way when I look at someone who's doing like a 22 or 30 something page single issue that's black and white, and they're wanting to get $20 for a physical copy. I'm not paying you $20 for a black and white comic book. I'm sorry. If I could sell my full color one at was it $10, I think, and still make a profit, you can make a profit on a black and white book, because I know for a fact it's cheaper for you to print it.
Right.
So, stuff like that.
20's a reach. 20's a reach, like for a
you have
single,
to
for a
keep in
single issue,
mind.
like,
Yeah, you have to keep in mind as a creator too. It's like, how are you going to be perceived? Because it's hard to bring those people to your crowdfunding campaign. And
right.
man, in my opinion, you should be doing everything you could do to retain the ones that you got and hopefully get more, and not do anything that's going to push anyone away,
Right.
as far as how you structure your campaign. But again, that's one thing I mentioned before, is Kickstarter is not regulated, that you can do whatever you want to on there. So you can put out a book that you drew with a crayon in 3 days. No, I mean, that's on you. And if people want to buy it, then they're going to buy it.
Hey, but I've said a million times, I will forgive the shittiest art for a good story. So if it's a
Hey,
good story, I don't care if it's crayons.
you and me, right? But when it comes to something like a Kickstarter, man, that's going to be hard for me to get past from looking at that art, because I can't really fully. You better hit me with a really good log line or a really good synopsis where I'm going to take a chance.
The sales pitch has got to be that kind of situation. The sales pitch has got to be all the way up here.
Yeah. Now, if I buy the book and I'm reading the book and I'm like, man, this art sucks, but I love the story, then yeah, I'm with you. Because I'm obviously a story guy, But yeah, it's hard to hook. You have on a Kickstarter, the art is what you're going to be hooking someone with. So, you'd really better have that good synopsis if your art's going to be kind of subpar or a little bit amateurish, I think, to get me to buy it. I mean, I'm not that hard of a sell. If it just sounds like something cool, I'm like, I'll probably take a chance on this, as long as I'm able to at that time financially.
Right.
Again,
right.
falling out of control, and it's real easy to fall into I want to back everything I see on Kickstarter to help these creators out. And next thing,
for sure. Yeah, I've definitely
you
had
think a
moments
pull
of
folder
that.
is expensive. You think a pull folder is expensive. Don't get your Kickstarter pull folder going and see how. Yeah,
I'm glad there's no running total on Kickstarter. Let's just say that.
I know, right? That's what I want to try to get instilled to people, though. Like, whoever's going to be watching this down the line is like, if you're a diamond catalog browser at your comic book store looking for the newest thing to order, I would love to see it become a little bit more ingrained in people to every Wednesday go on Kickstarter. Whenever you're looking for the new comic book day and what's new in the comic book store, take a little bit of your day and hop on Kickstarter to see what's on there, because there's some really cool stuff on there. There's a lot of garbage for sure, but there's some really cool stuff on there. And man, from doing one, I can tell you that every little bit of support you get really means a lot. You really feel it. So I would rather somebody buy my book on a Kickstarter than out of a comic book store. Well, I'd rather them support their comic book store and buy it from there. But as far as me personally, buy it on the Kickstarter, because I'm going to feel that a lot more impactfully than that shop would. But I mean, naturally, go buy it at the comic book store first if you want that copy. But yeah, go start supporting. Again, if people would start making that, there's so many people that hashtag NCBD every Wednesday, and they're going to their comic book store and buying, showing all their stuff that they bought. Totally cool, man. Again, do your thing however you want to do it, but flip through that Kickstarter. There's some stuff in there I can almost guarantee. I mean, I think that at any given time, there's probably 300 plus titles on there, hoping to be funded.
There's always something going on Kickstarter. That's I've as the indie hype man, geez, fucking stuttering apparently. I've decided that Thursday is the indie comics day. So that's when I started Thursdays. I've been trying to jump on Twitter and Instagram and share that stuff.
Awesome.
But and it's I think because it's spreading out, like it's now this, Tuesday is DC, Wednesday is Marvel, and then I know apparently I just found out from a shop that not all of their stuff comes the same time.
Yeah.
So like the trades come a different day than the singles do, which is insane to me.
Dude, if it's especially those distributors, man, are a freaking mess. Especially Diamond is hard to deal with. I can tell you that much for sure. That's a God.
It's I mean it's a lot of hassle to deal with up front as a creator. So I can imagine, like, I understand why DC and Marvel locked down.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
Like Diamond had him by the throat for 40 years. So it had to happen. It absolutely had to happen at some point, because I remember,
Thing is,
I'm a big Wizard fan, and I would read through those old magazines, and it's like in the early mid 90s there was a lot of talk. Everybody was jumping back and forth. There was a couple different distributors, and then the other one went out of business, and then Diamond took all their business, and then it was just Diamond, and then no one ever really talked about different distributors for a long time.
Yeah, you're right. You would think, though, with Diamond losing those big ones that they got, they would do a little bit of self-reflection and be like, we need to tighten up the operation, but they haven't shown any sign that they've done that since those guys have left. But I don't know. We'll see. I think they still have a big chunk of Marvel stuff, maybe like their international stuff or something like that. So I don't think they're going out of business anytime soon.
No. I was somebody was there was a brief moment where apparently a bunch of those Comicsgate folks decided to like create a publisher or distributor. But as soon as I read the pitch, I was like, I don't know about all this, because it was like a membership program, and like the creator would have to pay to be part of the distributor thing, and essentially like they weren't making money off selling comics, they were making money off of the creators. And I was like, this ends poorly for everyone involved. And unsurprisingly, within like 2 months after I saw that announcement, the website's gone. There's no mention of them anywhere. They're gone. And I was like, yeah, but
I do not understand how that ever sustained the level that it's at now.
Yeah, and for about 5 and during that conversation, I was like, this is the wrong approach. But this conversation should be had of having some sort of indie distributor. And I was just like, I tagged what's their face? Comics Wellspring, because I was like, you guys already do all the other shit.
Yeah.
Just like add it on.
Yeah, and hopefully you get a big audience that listens to this. And if there's any other publishers out there, this is what I would recommend, because I was trying to crack this code a little bit with getting pre-orders up through Blood Moon. And like I said, I'd spoken to so many of these shops over the time that I curated. I have a cool shop list, of all these that I've talked to, people who have had like really positive interactions or actually conversations with and just hit it off with. So I have a cool shop list. And so I went to Blood Moon and I said, listen, every problem is solvable. It just requires, everyone's just been in this loop, like you said, for so long, and it needs to be re-examined at this point. So my suggestion to Blood Moon, and they're actually in the process of starting this, I think they're really going to go forward with this on the first of the year. As I said, I will, because I'm pretty protective of my lists of people, as I've mentioned on our newsletter and stuff. I don't give emails out to, or nobody, other comic creators like, hey man, I ain't giving you shit. I will help you along the way, but you're not getting relationships that I've curated, because I don't trust that you're going to, do this responsibly. So anyways, I told Blood Moon, I said, I will provide you with my cool list. There's about 160 shops on there or something like that. I said, but this was my suggestion. I said, you need to create the working title that I gave him. I said, you need to create the Blood Moon Network, because a lot of these shops also don't like the relationship with Diamond and Lunar or whoever it might be. But they're a middleman between the shop and the publisher, but they don't need to be. I said, why don't you build direct relationships with these shops where either, they're going to order your books through Diamond or whatever, or they can order them directly from you, and you bypass that middleman, and then you give your shops that are in this network that you've curated exclusive stuff. So if they're going to support your stuff, I said, my model that I pitched to them was I said, what you're going to offer to them is exclusive content from your titles that
Right.
that other shops aren't going to get. Maybe some cool variants or some limited edition, whatever. I said, and what you're going to ask from them is to help promote your stuff. Help sell help sell the Blood Moon books. Have their staff review them. I want people. If my book sucks, I want to know that it sucks. And if a comic shop but I don't give a shit about reviews from people who are paid to make reviews. I want people who actually read the work and who are reading it because they're interested. I said, have the shop manager. They got time, during the week, have them read the book and give it a review on their website, push it on their social media. And then you create this kind of symbiotic relationship directly from you to the retailer, and you build this network. So say you get 100 of those shops on board. And if you can start getting these guys on board with doing maybe 10 copies of your books that you're doing, then there's 1,000 copies that you weren't selling before. So if you do that on a larger scale and you offer, and you nurture this and you build it the right way, then you basically are bypassing a lot of these problems that are created by, and you're helping your creators sell stuff. Hell, I'm like, set it up where you're even going to cons with these guys or in their towns or whatever, and team. There's a lot of different ways that it would work. And these larger publishers, honestly, these larger indie publishers with a staff, with like a full teams of people, there's really no reason why they hadn't done that other than maybe they haven't thought of it yet. But shops need to partner with retailers. It's without those retailers, comic books, what's the point of making this? They're not going to be sustainable anymore, and it'll die on the vine. And everyone, I keep seeing all these Eric Larson and all these dudes making these posts about, comics are dying and this is what you need to do to save it, and this is what you need to do to save it, and this was, I'm like, man, I don't feel like they're necessarily dying, but I just feel like it's, like I said, it's at an attrition point right now. It's almost like a wildfire is burning through the industry, and a lot of the more combustible stuff is not going to be there at the back end of this, but there'll be the new growth time afterwards, like in a wildfire, or a forest fire. So someone needs to take the initiative and outthink this problem and say, what can we be doing right now to alter the course of events here? And I feel like basically what I'm saying is like a publisher can build a relationship with a store on the same level that the creator, can build the relationship with a backer on a Kickstarter. You can do that, without the Kickstarter involved, but you can have that. And if you have that with enough places and you deliver to them and you become a reliable partner and they also return that, and you build this relationship on each person carrying their end of the bargain, man, then all of a sudden you got something going there, And I feel like if more shops would do that, if more publishers would do that, I know these shops would appreciate it, because they're like, man, we need some help, send us a creator every once in a while to do a signing or something like that. If you got enough stuff in place, that kind of thing becomes a little bit more sustainable to do,
Right.
Blood Moon's not operating with these vast margins of profitability, again, because like I said before, on the models that we're selling, if there's 30 cents coming to me, that means there's 30 cents going to them. So it's not per copy sold. So they're not balling out of control either. But there are ways where you can do that, where you can make a little bit more of an expense. Like we were talking about earlier, you can make a $10 comic. If it's going to be exclusive to this, maybe like network of shops,
right.
Then that becomes an easier selling point for them. And then you can start doing cool stuff like that and really kind of impact the industry in a good way, and bring on new fans and new readers to your publishing imprint, and then also really help that shop sell stuff, and everybody works together. I think you can do it, but I don't know, man. We'll see. But
you could expand on that as well with different publishers working with different shops. Let's say 3 or 4 different publishers decide to take a similar approach. If you like, I'm wealthy in comic shops. I've got 3 within like reasonable distance. I've got 15 if I go to the city. Like, if I could get something exclusive at this shop and something else exclusive at another shop and something else exclusive, that as a fan, that's reason to go hang out, and you have more opportunity as a shop to get more exposure, more money, and just in general, just to touch one more wallet,
Look, the model exists in the stories that we love. I mean, I would love to see Blood Moon reach out to maybe find 3 or 4 other small publishers who are all going through the same struggle. Form the fucking Publishing Justice League, right?
Yeah.
You know, you can all do your own thing. Nobody's stealing from anyone else, but if you go to a bunch of comic book shops with a little team of comic book publishers and like, hey, we all want to work with you and let's do some cool stuff together, man. I can't imagine a shop unless they're Midtown or someone who doesn't need anything like that. But the vast majority of shops are not that. So they'd probably be like, hell yeah, that's awesome, dude. Let's do some cool stuff. Because like I told Bloodman, I'm like, instead of relying on one of these shops to do a store exclusive of one of my books or one of the other titles there, just it doesn't need to be a store exclusive. We can make it a network exclusive where you're not putting this big burden on them to find an artist and order X amount of copies. Who gives a shit about that? Just the whole goal is to get your work out there. And I'm also a big believer in an incredibly important part of that goal needs to be, you need to do it the right way. You need to do it with ethics and with just some coolness, I guess is the best. Don't be exploitive. Don't it's the dollars and the cents, all that shit comes once you're doing things the right way, but if you're focused on the money first, man, it leads to scumbaggery, so I would love to see them do that, man. Go team up with a couple of the other like smaller publishers and then just go kill it, decide, hey, we're going to go to, like I said, it's the goddamn Publishing Justice League. You set out for the year and be like, we're going to go to this con, that con, this con, that con. We're going to do one booth and we're all going to have a little sliver of it, and we're all just going to kick ass and take names and grow together. And then, next thing you know, you can take 4 small publishers like that. And they don't need to even be, it's completely separate businesses. But next thing you know, you got a nice little inter-Justice League competition where everybody's going to want to be putting out the best-selling book of all 4 of you, so you can talk shit to the other 3 members of the Publishing Justice League that are in there, and you're just doing cool stuff. And then when you have 4 small ones, then you become like Voltron. Then you got one giant, or one significantly larger entity that can impact the industry in a bigger way than all 4 of you can separately, individually. So I think if you go about it the right way, I mean, it's realistic. I'm not a publisher though, so all I can do is give them that advice. But I did give that suggestion to Blood Moon, and I think they're going to start around the beginning of 2024 building that Blood Moon network. And I know that he's cool before, because I reached out. Another idea that I had was I was getting a little bit frustrated when I was seeing some of these publishers on Kickstarter, when I would notice that they weren't backing anything, that they've made $100,000 but have never backed anything else on the thing. I was like, that's kind of crappy in my opinion, and I know I've had this conversation with a lot of people that I'm sure some of the people in that publishing entity also back stuff. And I get that. But my opinion thing is, if you're going to launch a Kickstarter as a publisher, I think Kickstarter personally should create a policy where you're not able to even have a campaign until you've at least backed 5 other things. I think that would be a good policy personally, but because it should be
a reasonable position.
Yeah. But I came up with this idea where I was like, what if we, and I went to Blood Moon with this, and I was like, what if we created a Kickstarter, and the whole goal was going to be, call it For the Little Guys. And we basically take a book from a #1 issue from each of the Blood Moon creators. Doesn't cost us anything, right? And we all kind of donate that to a box, right? So you're going to get, let's say it's 5 or 6 various #1 issues that are going to all come bundled together, and it would just be, that would be the only thing on the tier for the Kickstarter campaign, and say it's $25. So out of that $25, Blood Moon would recoup only their print cost. There's no profit to be made. And then all the profit from the Kickstarter, if it's funded and successful, those 5 creators or whomever that contributed their #1 issue to that would have like a little virtual meeting at the end, and you would pick 5 or so campaigns that were near the end who were just short of being funded, and you would just bequeath them, 20% of whatever profit you'd made off of that, just because it's a cool thing to do.
That would be super cool.
Right. And they were cool with it. But then I read a thing I'd have to look into a little bit more, because there's a thing on Kickstarter that says you can't do like fundraising, like charity stuff on there. But then I also saw that a bunch of these comic book creators just did something very similar to my idea for striking WGA writers. So I don't know really how that would work, but I mean, Blood Moon was cool doing it. So it may be something that we do down the line, because I see a lot of these dudes who are like, they're only asking for maybe $2,000, and, their last day, and they're, $300 away, and they're probably not going to get there. It'd be super cool to just not even back it, but just give it as a gift. Boom, you're funded. Congratulations.
Right.
That, like, for 5 people, man, it's just a cool thing to do. I don't know, stuff like that. That's the kind of way that I look at it. Things like that could really make an impact on this industry as a whole, because it is, like I said, it is very, not necessarily cutthroat, but it is very vicious in a lot of different ways, as we've spoken about already on here. But there's things that could be done that would take a little bit of that sting away, I think, and it's just little stuff like that. So, I mean, hopefully it'll continue to get to the point where we'll be able to continue to make stuff and be able to do projects and things like that. So, only the future will tell, but hopefully people that listen to this maybe consider doing some stuff like that. If you're with a publisher, man, hit them up and do like that for the Little Guys campaign. If it's doable, if it is doable, we're going to probably do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the interesting aspect of that is I think the reason, I mean, this is purely conjecture, but I think the reason they don't want like charity, like collecting money for charity, is because that in and of itself, like charity donations in and of themselves, have just such a nebulous like accountability.
Oh yeah,
there's
no,
been how many millions of times has it happened where people have been, some even celebrity or whatever has been part of something. It turns out they're getting paid $1.5 million to be part of it, but and like only $20,000 went to the thing, and I'm like, what the fuck,
That was why I told Blood Moon, I said, I will not be I told him, because I said I would run the campaign for you. I said, but I will not be involved with it unless you agree that you will only. I don't expect them to take a loss. I'm like, so you're going to have to print these issues, reprint these issues.
Right.
You're going to show me your print bill. We'll make you even on that. And then whatever's left over will then be, disseminated. It's not really charity, I guess. So, I mean, there might be a way to do it. I'll have to look at it. But,
I mean, it's just
what you're saying.
It's like you're making a profit, but then after the fact, you are deciding this is what we're doing. So I think it would be an interesting way around it. I don't see why you would have a problem getting it on there.
I remember when I was in the service, they had these we had to give to a charity. You had to give, it was forced on you. It's called the Combined Federal Campaign, the CFC. But they would give you this booklet that you would go through, and you could read all these charities: American Heart Association, Red Cross, Salvation Army, and it would tell you what percentage of your contribution actually goes to the charity. This was back but before the internet existed.
Right.
So, I was always interested to look through some of this and be like, man, these freaking scumbags, dude, they're taking 40% for administrative costs, probably collecting billions of dollars a year. What a shit bag.
That's the thing that kills me, man, is like, I understand that you have to have organizational types in a charity.
Yes.
But like, why do they have to make $400,000 a year?
Exactly right. That's very non-charitable.
It doesn't feel charitable. It should be like bare minimum. Like, it's the same way I feel about political. Like, I don't feel like you should get $400,000, $500,000, $700,000 a year to sit in a room that we pay for, eat the food that we pay for.
100% agree. Yeah. And then become a guaranteed like multi-millionaire afterwards, just doing book events and rally talks and stuff like that.
Yeah. There should be something a little more reasonable with charities and politicians as far as salaries, because like it crushes me every time I hear something like that, where it's like, oh, this is like cancer research charity, and the CEO makes $700,000 a year, and in total over the last 3 years 73,000 have gone to research. I'm like, what?
Yeah, you're like, damn, dude, you think maybe like if couple 100,000 of that would have been contributed to the charity. Maybe we would have found a cure a little faster or something,
Maybe something. They
Yeah,
might
no,
have
I
a little bit
believe in
better
you.
treatment or something. Like,
I'm 100% with you on that, man. So yeah, that I feel like there's a room for that in comic books too. I think, or any industry really, but I think what we're doing here on a smaller level, I think there is a big space open right now, and someone just needs to take the initiative and make it happen, where you can do a little bit more of a unification and sustain yourselves and this industry. And then, at the same time, you don't lose anything because you can still entertain readers and deliver cool comic books to people and
right.
stuff like that. So, hopefully, like I said, I think there's some good stuff that comes from these harder times that the industry's going through at the moment. And so, we'll see how it all shakes out. But I'm going to try my best to be a positive contributor to the sustaining of the industry, to let creators continue to do their thing.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I think everyone needs to take that lesson to heart. There's a lot of roadblocks in making comic books and making any kind of creative effort, but I would say even more so comic books. And to get to have enough people out there that are just trying to make the space a little bit easier, to make the space a little more friendly, I think that's huge.
Yeah, I think so. And it's not a me thing. I think it's just being a part of it now and seeing like, oh, this could be a little bit better, for others, because I know there's a lot of folks on Kickstarters who are fledgling creators who really have a story that they want to tell, and for they don't have that big marketing machine behind them like you talked about before. So having someone who's just willing to throw in on them and help them get to the finish line. I mean, I know how that feels to a lot of people. I
Right.
also understand how it feels when you don't get like your project funded. It's like a real like kick in the sack as we till you bring that back again. I mean, it sucks, man. But if you can mitigate some of that heartbreak for someone, I figure, why not? Why don't you do it?
For sure, man. For sure. Well, I love the mentality. I love the approach. I'm super excited to get my copy of Endangered. I really, for some reason, I thought the Dirt Witch was sooner, but I guess I will have to wait till
It's
February, March.
Yeah, that one's all finished with pencils are all done. I think he's down to like another page or two for the inks, and the colors just started. So that's the crazy thing about it. It could have been sooner if we are just doing Kickstarter, but with Diamond, when you do a book with Diamond, this is another. Well, you can kind of close on this, I guess, but everything happens so far in advance. So to get
Mm.
our book into February, it had to be turned in. Everything had to be submitted to them by the end of October, to
Oh
get into
wow.
the February catalog. So it's like at least 3 months in advance. So when you submit, here's my book, here's my synopsis, here's my cover images, the price, all the stuff that's going to go in that catalog, that has to be like 3 months in advance. So
Oh,
that is really the reason why we're going to do the campaign in March. The book will be way finished before then, but that time frame now gives me the cool side for folks is it's going to give me more time to really put together a really cool ass campaign and get some of the cool stuff made that we want to do. So there will be no excuse for it to not be awesome this time
that's all.
around.
That's great. That's great. I love to hear that. I'm a big fan. This is actually the second in a row episode where someone has said that they're going to have their book 100% complete before the campaign launches,
Yeah.
and that's huge. That's huge because I'm still waiting on some comics. Let's just put it that way.
Oh no, dude, listen, I back a couple that came out like almost 10 years ago that I never gotten in it's like, hey man,
I'm at 11 on one book. My first Kickstarter that I ever backed is still unfulfilled.
yeah, no, all of our book, that's the one thing. If you ever back one of our campaigns, the book will be done. All the interior pages will be done, the variant cover offerings, they're all done. Like with the Loup Garou right now, the only thing we're waiting on right now is and it should happen tomorrow, is we wait on you. There's a couple week period there when you get funded that
Mm,
Kickstarter has to give the money to you. But
gotcha.
we have to wait for that because I don't want to create a print run, and then if 5 people haven't paid, and then I short that print run by X amount, then they pay on the last month, so there's all that kind of stuff. But that should be happening hopefully tomorrow, because tomorrow's the second week after it ended. But we're all ready to go. I mean, everything is ready to rock and roll. We had it's all formatted and filed and ready to go to the printer, and just boom, let's do it.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, that's that little bit of a delay that happens. But no, if you ever back one of my books, you can rest assured that it will be finished before the campaign even starts.
Love to
That
hear it.
would make me nervous as hell, dude, to be like, oh man. I had one guy I saw there who who did one not that long ago, and he wound up taking it down. I don't know if it was because he and I talked about this, but he went to launch it like in the middle of October, and his release date was scheduled for October of 2024. I'm like, dude, why the fuck are you doing a single issue comic that they're not going to get for a year? And then he canceled it. I'm like, yeah, dude, don't do that yet. Now, once you're ready to get the book out, then you do the campaign. You know, I mean, again, that reads to me, if I'm a consumer, I look at that, I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Right. Yeah.
Need
If
my
if
money, and then it's going to take you a year to make it. That's a high probability that I'll never see that book. You know,
if it's something like that, I will say the only people I trust with something like that far of a reach now, like a delivery time frame, is like the big ones, is
oh
Boom
yeah,
Studios.
or for
Like
somebody that you supported before and you know who are
yeah,
going
yeah,
to deliver, and they've built that trust with you. Yes,
for
but if
sure.
this is your first one, I don't feel like that should not even be remotely considered the move to try to put
No,
that long.
that's
I mean, I know sometimes it's tough to get them made because it costs a lot of money to do them, but
and
you
that
know, you
I'm
can't
definitely in that field. I'm 100% in that field. I'm waiting for that. The getting it put together, getting like the artist, like right now, essentially, I need $1,000 to move forward the way I had originally intended to with my book, and
yeah.
I'm like, I gotta put that $1,000 together and get the artwork done
Yeah.
because I really do want to put it out the way I was like intending to.
And again, man, when you're doing it though, if you're doing it from if you're trying to get it crowdfunded from concept to get it completed, like I said before, there's a lot of things that could go wrong in that process. So it's a really big gamble
Right.
to make a promise. Okay, I am confident that this thing, because I thought, hell, I didn't think there was going to be a problem. We got Endangered issue 1 done. I already got the script written for 2. The character designs have already happened in issue 1. It should be no problems, but stuff happens. You know,
Right.
it does become difficult to hit. Sometimes there's things you don't anticipate that occurred during those windows of time, and it can go sideways really quickly on you. So yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough to get these things made for sure, bro.
For sure, for sure. Well, let's wrap it up here. That's gonna be it for this one. Go ahead, John. Give me your socials. Let's let the people know where they can find you on the internet.
Yeah, listen, if you guys are still listening at this point, man, thanks a lot for listening to us ramble. I think we had a good conversation. Hell, I'd be still
Definitely.
to this if I was just watching it. But so you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Endangered Comic. So it's like the word endangered species, except followed by the word comic, at Endangered Comic. On Twitter, I am not super active on there anymore, but every once in a while I'll go on there and pop something off. But it's at Jon Mass Casualty. So it's JonMassCasualty. And then TikTok, where I'm probably my most entertaining between my crappy Fortnite clips and my crow befriendment at work and my stray cat befriendment at work and some comic book stuff. That one is Jon McCarthy Comics, I think. Yeah. JonMcCarthyComics, which I have to preface that these days because I didn't realize that a lot of people do their stuff as COMIX. So I'll
Yeah.
call a shop one time. They're like, yeah, send us an email. It's bobscomics@gmail.com. I'm like, all right. Yeah, it's BOBSCOMIX. I'm like, bro, you got to preface that. Let me know at a
Yeah.
time. Now I've learned to ask, is it COMIX or COMICS? So I
There's a
am
comic
Jon
shop
McCarthy.
in my area. It's Keith's Comics with a KOMIX.
Keith, I think Keith is on one of my lists. Actually, I know
Keith
that.
is good people. Keith is good people for sure.
We'll do
I
that.
would recommend if you haven't spoken to them yet, just because they're good people, and I vouch for them personally. Blurred's Underground in LaGrange, Illinois.
I know that
Great
one's
shop.
on there. I know Blurred's is on there for sure. I've talked to those cats before. Yeah, so they're pretty cool people. But
That's
awesome, man.
awesome.
Listen, thanks a lot for having me on, bro. I really appreciate it. It's been awesome talking to you. I love talking about comic books and stuff like that. And yeah, anybody out there, man, hit us up on the social media. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions and offer any of this like little bit of knowledge I have in here on what I've experienced so far in this industry, especially if you're a creator. I'd be more than happy to give you any pointers that I have. Like I said, I'm not Stan Lee, but I've got a couple miles under my belt at this point, you know.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, that's gonna be it for this one, folks. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next one.
Later, guys.
They wanna tell you about how they been living before they go living. My vision is vivid. I wander the places they marvel. The shit that I'm talking is low-key a novel. Yeah, I'm so lit, but a lonely spark. About to end game like Tony Stark.